Okay. I see chat moving. Debate, 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 debate. This is a lot of people for the beginning of a stream. Debate. I can't believe I'm debating this fucking topic. But you know, we have popular demand. We're just doing our jobs here. Discord link in the description. Jump in. Hashtag stream chat. If you want to super chat, go to YouTube. I will read everything in the gaps, possibly after the debate. Hey, look who it is. Warm lighting. I moved my couch because I was watching films. Know how well charged my light is. But we'll go with it. How's everyone doing? How are all 221 of you doing? Everyone enjoying themselves? Everyone enjoying the Biden victory? The replacement of a incredibly terrible and egregious racist for a slightly more conventional racist? We'll probably talk about that after the debate. I might have some thoughts for the left. Where we go now? Oh, there are many of you. Cool. Yes, fuck Biden. Now that he's president, no more malarkey, no more Jack, no more laser beam grinning face bouncing around on Twitter. Biden bad. Okay. I think, without further ado, we should call our guest. I don't know what he actually wants me to call him. Commented under his real name. We'll see if he'd prefer a pseudonym. Let's see how we're doing. Hello, Lawboy. Good. Start a voice call.
Hello.
Hello.
You can hear me all right?
I hear you all right. Yeah, perfectly
Okay,
well.
cool. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was going to introduce you, but I don't really know which name you'd like to go under.
Just Patrick is fun.
Patrick, okay. Cool. How are you doing?
Not too bad. How are you?
Yeah, fine. I'm in Scotland. It's cold, but we'll get
All
by.
right.
Anyway, yes, you had a few contentions, a fairly long YouTube comment. I did take notes of some of the points, but I think since most people probably haven't read it, almost everyone, I'll just let you begin. What are your thoughts
Okay.
on?
Well, my main objections were my basic point is that the video appears to be using holes in things like the Quilliam report and inconsistencies and lack of data as a reason to dismiss concerns over grooming gangs in general, when I think it's quite a serious issue, however you want to describe it.
Okay.
That's the basic gist of it.
The basic gist is that there were holes in the Quilliam study, and I'm using that to. So, okay, first of all, I don't know how many times I mentioned it in the video. I think I did go a few times to say that obviously the crimes committed by these people are absolutely horrifying. The negligence, I mentioned quite a few times as well, on the part of the police and probably councils as well, was pretty much unforgivable. And the gist I was kind of going for was that term, grooming gangs, as well as just the narrative that's been spun around it, has had nothing to do with protecting or providing justice to victims, and everything to do with racializing a problem that I don't think has warranted racialization or focus on a religious community in particular. I think the first comment you put on the YouTube comment was something about the term itself, grooming gangs. I mean, do you want me to elaborate on why I've got a problem with that, or?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, you go ahead. I won't try and guess. But
Okay. So grooming gangs is not a legal term. It doesn't exist in police data. It doesn't exist in courts, and it doesn't exist in criminology. The problem with it originated out of a journalist in the Sunday Times, Andrew Norfolk, who about 10 years ago published what was called an expose of a new emerging crime threat, an epidemic of grooming. He used 56 case studies that added up to 56 offenders over a period of, can't remember how many years ago, I think it was 12 to 15. The average was 4 offenders per year. He was not a very well-known journalist at the time, but after that, he started to win awards. He became a lot more prominent, and obviously that term, grooming gang, has just been something that the press have run with, as well as politicians and right-wing pundits, generally speaking. They seem to be the ones who enjoy it the most. So I just think there is something very useless about using a term that you can't measure by looking at police databases. There's no police database that has any data on grooming gangs. There are no court documents on grooming gangs. There's no criminological study on grooming gangs. Problem with that is definitions can be bent, definitions can be flimsy. It can and because it was associated with South Asians, i.e. Muslims, very, very early on, it can lead people down a path to think that there is something special about Muslims doing these crimes that makes it a grooming gang, whereas white offenders and groups of white offenders who commit almost identical crimes escape the label, and it produces an illusion of overrepresentation.
Okay, now I understand your objection to the term being immediate concoction. I didn't have a problem. That's a valid criticism. However, the term is referring nonetheless to a specific phenomena. Like, the problem isn't so much that we have conclusively proven a link between Islam and Middle Eastern cultures and rape and sexual abuse. The problem is that there appears on the face of it to be more than just a coincidental correlation between the two, and we need to investigate it. And that's not to say that it's all Muslims. I would say that it's specific subsects of the Muslim community, the radical sects, and it's not. Yeah, do you get what I'm saying?
Did you say that there's conclusive evidence of connections between Islam and rape? That was kind of what
No. Specifically, the problem is that no, we do not have a conclusive connection, but the problem isn't that we've conclusively proven it's not possible. The problem is that we don't have enough data to say either way.
Yeah, I agree. We don't have enough data. So I think maybe the problem there is that I don't know if there's any. I mean, people do study this. That's the thing. That people do study the correct term would be child sexual exploitation, CSE, or group CSE in this case. People do study that. There has been, I think there was one study in particular that often gets very badly misused, is by the CEOP, which did find that there was a slight overrepresentation amongst South Asians when it came to group CSE. They even explained it within the study. First of all, the bit of the study that never gets repeated is that they said their sample was way too small to draw conclusions. A few suggestions they offered were over-policing in the Muslim community. It turns out that police actually are not particularly nice to Muslims for obvious reasons. And the other thing that they found was that any immigrant population that is likely to be overrepresented in sexual assault is because sexual assault is disproportionately committed by men under the age of 35 or 40, young men. And immigrants, because of their economic function, because of the reason they're brought over here, are statistically younger than the native population and therefore might be slightly overrepresented in sexual abuse. I don't really know why the link between Islam and rape. I don't really know where exactly that is. I mean, could you? Is there anything that suggests? Because ethnicity and rape does get logged quite a lot. As far as I know, Asians are underrepresented in child abuse as a whole. They make up 7% of the population, and they're 4% of the assaults, I'm pretty sure, children.
Okay, well, it's a complicated mixture. It's not just ethnicity. It's not just religion or culture. It's kind of it's an indeterminate amount of all three. I think. Like, for example, like you look at the Muslim world in general, their track record on the treatment of women is pretty appalling. I don't think that's controversial to say. Um,
Yeah,
so
so
I'm
I mean, obviously, I'm not going to try and defend Pakistan or Saudi Arabia or whatever. We're talking about British Muslims,
yeah.
Muslims
Well, I was
who have quite often been born and lived in the UK. So I'm just wondering, on Muslims in the UK, what I want to know is, yeah, you can say that obviously in Saudi Arabia and all that, they do, yeah, they're oppressive to women, and they will reference Islam as the reason for doing so. Whether or not they would still do it without a religious doctrine telling them to, I don't know. It seems men in general have historically been pretty bad when it comes to women and children. Would you not say the common denominator when it comes to child abuse then is organized religion and conservatism? Because child marriage is still a problem in several Republican states. Nigeria has a problem with it. FGM as a whole in Africa is just as much of an issue in highly Christian countries in Central Africa as it is Muslim ones. So I don't know if why the Islam is important to you in the UK. That
well,
is.
I don't know about the like FGM or anything like that. But thinking specifically about British Muslims, just to go back to your point there, things such as how would you say it? There's the majority of mosques in the UK fall under the Deobandi sect of Islam, which is an explicitly anti-British, very fundamentalist sect of Islam, and that's the infiltration point. Not to phrase it in conspiratorial terms, but that's the point of transmission I see between the sexist attitudes of the broader Muslim world.
Is there a connection between mosques and grooming in the UK?
No, the mosques are what give Islam in the country its character, because that's where people learn it, that's where they practice it, that's where they're taught it.
Right. I don't really. I'm pretty sure most Islamic radicalization in the UK happens online. Muslim youths are not particularly swayed by imams. It's kind of like there's a massive generational gap there. If you have a citation for the fact that that there's radical fundamentalism in most British mosques, I mean, I'd like to see that. But I think my experience of being around British mosques is that they just wash themselves and pray and go home, and often are very bad at speaking to the youth. And obviously, this is young people who commit these crimes. The Muslim, the people who fall under those stories of grooming are known to basically always use alcohol and gifts to entice their victims, and they drink themselves. I don't really know how much they're adhering to what the local imam is telling them.
Yeah, but you would say that ISIS are breaking out any number of Islamic principles and injunctions, but you wouldn't say that they have nothing to do with Islam. So I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, they've got plans. So I'm just wondering though, like, what's the connection between the mosques and the grooming gangs?
Well, so you're saying that young people don't find much appeal in the mosques, but these young people are raised by parents who do go to mosques, right? Like, I'm really not trying to concoct some. What would you say? I know this sounds like I'm trying to establish a connection with the original, but where else do you learn your religious practices and principles if not from your parents and the culture you're raised in?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I don't. Yeah, you would. You'd learn. It would come from, I don't know, family teachings or from just personal online. I mean, that's the big thing. I know that I've read a few studies on British youth, and most of it comes from the internet, like young British Muslims.
I really don't think that the internet is where people learn to be religious.
No, it absolutely is. Like, young British Muslims get much more. They're much more. What would you call it? Like online preachers and online modernized Muslim figures have a lot more influence over the British Muslim youth than mosques do, and their parents. Obviously, they're kids, like they're young people.
So do you have nothing to say then about the amount of Deobandi mosques and the fact that, for example, Saudi Arabia and Wahhabists and foundations fund other mosques. And
Yeah, I do. I don't like Islam. I don't like conservative Islam, especially, which is where most of these and theocracies. I don't really like any of it. My problem is I don't. I just if you're looking for a common denominator, then the denominator when it comes to that kind of attitude would be conservatism and organized religion, not Islam. Especially, we're talking about the UK after all.
Okay, but I'm sorry, I don't see. Actually, sorry, I have a bunch of notes here to look through. If that's right. Sorry. So could you say that what you said again, please?
I would say if we're talking about issues of child abuse and backwards views on women, I would say the common denominator there is given how things are around the Western world, whether it's Europe or America or the UK, I would say the common denominator when it comes to backwards views on women and young children would be organized religion and conservatism, more so than just Islam.
The search for a common denominator would be an argument from correlation, not causation. Like I don't think that's.
Wait, what wouldn't Islam be a correlation, not a causation as well?
Well, look, okay, I'm not open. I agree that my point was that we don't have enough information on this, and the impression I got from your video was that you were kind of dismissing the need to investigate this problem.
I think one of the sentences in that video was there's nothing wrong with studying ethnicity and crime.
Or what about religion and crime?
Yeah, people do that. Yeah.
Okay, but
like the Catholic, yeah, the amount of investigations that have to get done into the Catholic Church for the same thing. Yeah. And not to mention something that people who tout the grooming gang thing seem to never have much to say for is, well, the grooming gang thing in particular, is that they have this claim that about the overwhelming whiteness of the victims, which is, I can see why they've fallen to that conclusion because it refers to street grooming, but these people don't really seem to have any interest when it's Muslim offenders doing it to Muslim victims. We have barely any data on that because no one seems to be that interested in it.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not one of those people who would not be interested in that. I would be interested in the grooming no matter who it's happening to. So I'm not.
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, yeah, not. So what exactly? I'm struggling to see exactly what you think I did wrong then.
Okay, let me look at my notes here. I mean, there's, from what I could find when I was doing some digging and researching, the specific nature of this grooming phenomena, the fact that it's systematic, that there's trafficking involved. You know, it's not even necessarily. I can't remember what study it was. That some study said it wasn't even necessarily the fact that these men had sexual attraction to children. It was simply the fact that they viewed these young girls as vulnerable, and that their attitudes towards young women was the deciding factor. And I don't know if that's like, that seems to be a cultural difference. Do you not think so?
If you were saying it was a cultural difference, you'd have to show that they were overrepresented in the abuse of children, which they don't seem to be.
Well, I mean, they do seem to be overrepresented. There's Muslims make up 5% of the British population, and yet they seem to be committing far more than 5% of the sexual abuses.
No, not the sexual abuses. No, which crime category in particular you talk about? Not sex. They're South Asians are underrepresented in child sexual abuse. They're underrepresented. The whole of child sexual abuse.
From what I could find, I mean, this, the organized group child exploitation.
So group child exploitation, yeah. So the one study that that found that was from the CEOP. That was the one that I found, and they explained it within the study. They said why they found that. They said partially over policing, and the other part was to do with the fact that immigrant populations in general are young men, are younger, and more likely to, and young people are, well, people, I say young as in under 35, 40, are more likely to commit those crimes. It's almost always people below that age margin.
Okay. I'm looking at a study. There's an article here from an independent organization called Full Fact. I don't know. It's an article that seems to full of statements saying that it's not a closed deal. It's not a done deal that ethnicity and religion has nothing to do with this stuff. There needs to be more investigation. That's my main point.
Yeah, and I said that. I'm fine, but what my problem is that Quilliam and Tommy Robinson and Sargon and all that aren't interested in more investigation regarding that. They're just interested in calling it a specifically Muslim issue.
How could you say that they're not interested in more investigation? Of course they're.
Well, because of their behavior, because everything they've done has had nothing to do with help. Like they haven't helped any victims or. Sorry.
For more investigation.
Well, which one in particular? I mean, Quilliam just drew a graph and didn't say, didn't write any sources next to it. Tommy Robinson almost collapsed a trial of grooming by turning up in front of the court doorstep and confronting the offenders. Sargon, just makes videos and complains and misreads studies. So I don't really know which one of those in particular. And the victims themselves believe this. The victims themselves have had complaints about the EDL and about Tommy Robinson and about even about Quilliam and just.
What does that have to do with?
Sorry?
What does that have to do with whether or not they want more investigation into this issue? You said that they're only interested in framing this as an ethnicity thing. I don't think that's true.
What? According to what? Do you see them when it comes, like when back in 2016 when people were arguing about rape culture and Sargon was just saying, this is just a fact of life, and I don't know. I don't really see the raging anti-feminist Sargon look out. Yeah, are you still speaking? You're breaking up a lot. Sorry.
To interviews and video. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah. I've watched a fair few videos. I've watched interviews and speeches by Tommy Robinson. I mean, they do consistently call for more investigation, and they're more nuanced than I think you're giving them credit for. Like they're not perfect. Obviously, they have a lot of problems, but
what did Tommy Robinson do that was new? I've seen clips of Tommy Robinson saying taking the Quilliam study stat, which said something like 84% of grooming gangs are South Asian, and then you look at Tommy Robinson, and Tommy Robinson is saying something like 90% of child sexual exploitation is done by Muslims. Tommy, there's nothing. What I don't really. Where's the? Okay, one at a time. What is nuanced about Tommy Robinson's approach to grooming that I'm missing?
Well, the video that I watched that gave me the fullest impression of him was his Oxford address. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah, where he just gives anecdotes that can't be verified or falsified. Yeah, he spends 2 hours giving anecdotes. Yeah, I've seen that. I mean, they put him in a suit, which was helpful, but
that's really affected him. And despite all that, he's trying. And even him. I know it's not popular to say this, but even Tommy Robinson says, I know it's not all Muslims. He's just impassioned whenever he brings it up.
Yeah,
I'm not saying what he did at the trial, for example, is that's stupid. Shouldn't do that. But,
sorry. I think we're gonna have to. I'm gonna call you back because you're breaking up quite a bit. I'll just try again. Hang on. You try now.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, if you have a bunch of tabs open, you might want to close them.
Okay. Is that there?
You're still kind of phasing.
Okay, it might just be my Wi-Fi.
Do you want to take a minute to reset it? I can easily gain my My droogs over here.
I'll be back in a second.
Okay. I'll tell him to give me a bump when he's ready. How is this conversation going for everyone? 530 viewers. I really hope his Wi-Fi comes back because we were just about to talk about something slightly more interesting. Painfully bad. Okay. I'm pretty sure someone else who wanted to debate me appeared in chat. There was someone else who wanted to debate last time who was in YouTube chat. I hope the Saudis didn't get his internet. That would really go against my argument. Where's the guy? Someone in YouTube chat wanted to debate. Where are they? We might need some reserves. You're all droogs. Don't argue with me. Mr. Sutton, Mark Sutton, was it you? What do you want to say? I don't think it was you, but I guess it can be you. He's stored in the balls. Honestly, I don't know. Will I chug this and find out? He's still online, so he hasn't restarted his router. Router. Oh, I'm not debating independence versus federalization. Mark, are you insane? You want me to do research and like learn about statecraft for you? What do those words even mean? Oh wait, what's this? Doing something. I'm from Scotland, despite appearances. Ludicrous Kill is in YouTube chat. Hey, someone give Ludicrous Kill the Discord. If Patrick doesn't come back in the next 3 minutes, 4 minutes, that's about enough time to reset an internet. Am I a current Destiny fan? It depends. I saw the last Destiny thing I saw of him was he was talking to was him talking to Sargon about like COVID conspiracies and how Sargon and all his friends were preemptively bragging about a Trump win because he won like Indiana and Kentucky. He was ahead in Indiana and Kentucky on direct votes, so before the postal votes were counted, and they were celebrating and laughing and shit. Yeah, it was funny. Well done, Trump. You won fucking Wyoming. Well done. I like how they knew that postal votes were coming, but they just kind of got excited on the first day anyway. Almost like these people have no fucking idea what they're talking about. Mark, so and the question, the answer to that question is quite obvious. Tommy Robinson doesn't exist. Tommy Robinson is a ghost, a phantom, a parasite that is currently feeding off a poor man called Stephen Yaxley Lennon, and is probably currently seeking a new host, hopefully one which is more self-controlled and more aware of public opinion. It would be quite scary. Oh, we have a Discord call. Hang on. Patrick, hello. You've muted yourself, but we're here.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, you're clear. Amazing.
Okay, good.
Okay, you go.
Where were we?
Tommy Robinson, or anyone in particular who I think is not very helpful to the discussion, but you think is.
Well, I'm not saying that they're necessarily helpful.
Yeah.
They're just necessary. They may, no matter how distasteful they may be. Like, Tommy Robinson is living in the communities affected by these things. I think that in and of itself necessitates a certain grace when dealing with him. Like, you have to excuse.
No, wait. Coming from a community doesn't give you any kind of divine right to talk about it. Like, no.
That's not what I meant. I meant that he obviously has an emotional attachment to this issue, right?
Right.
So
you mind if I say one thing there?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, let's say I believe that Tommy Robinson is completely sincere, that he really does care about, he cares about the children. He's doing this for the children, or for his community, or for whatever working class people who are affected by whatever he says. Islamification or the liberal deep state, whatever he talks about. So I believe he's completely sincere in that. He really genuinely wants to help. I tend to judge people not based on what they think of themselves or what they are intending, but by the consequences of what they do. And Tommy Robinson has...
what they do or the consequences of what they do?
Sorry?
What they do and their intentions or the consequences of those actions?
What they do and the consequences. That's what I would judge them by, yeah.
Okay.
And I think the consequences of Tommy Robinson's actions were, one, that he almost collapsed a trial based around of a Muslim group of Muslim group offenders, because he stood outside a court illegally and filmed and live streamed himself confronting defendants, which is irresponsible on so many levels. Not just that it provides ammunition to the defense to collapse the trial because he might have influenced the opinion of the jurors, but also the fact that that would cause a delay in the court case, which is completely inconsiderate to victims. Like, imagine, like, you've got and this is documented as well, anything that disrupts the process is massively distressing to victims. They've prepared their statements, they're ready to confront the people who have abused them when they were children, and then someone comes up to them and says, you actually have to give this testimony a bit later because Tommy Robinson is outside filming the defendants. Yeah, that's one incident. I can go over plenty more.
Okay, well, he has since, as far as last time I checked, he has since acknowledged that was wrong, and he hasn't. That's a pattern of behavior he's not continuing.
Well, because it's criminal and got him jailed, yeah. But I don't think that. I think live streaming yourself committing contempt of court and doubling down on it for several months afterwards. He doubled down on that after he came out of court. He released a documentary about how he lying about how he hadn't pled guilty in that Panorama thing that he did.
Sorry, but why did he do what he did in the first place?
I don't care why he did it. That's not the kind of thing that average people... No, because people who investigate sexual abuse all the time, academics, people who work for crisis centers and things like that, that kind of behavior is not the kind of thing you should have to learn not to do because of trial and error. You just don't do it.
Okay, but we're dealing with them, like, I don't see that, like, this is a crime of passion, we would say, would we not? He's clearly
don't care.
Angry at these people, and he's angry on behalf of the people he sees as being.
Why is he angry? Why is he angry at them in particular? We have like 6,000
because they were accused of molesting and have been confirmed and convicted of molesting young girls.
And we have about 6,000 offenders per year doing that. That's like hundreds a day. Wait, not hundreds a day. My math is shit. That's a lot of people. Okay, why them in particular? Why is it always when it's brown people doing it? Why is that more important to him? I've never seen Tommy Robinson having to go to the Catholic Church.
These are the specific people who are affecting his community.
They're doing what?
He's mad at the people he sees as being responsible for afflicting his community with this thing.
They didn't afflict his community. Has there been a grooming gang in Luton?
Yes.
I didn't know about that. But this wasn't but this was in front of the Huddersfield gang that he did this, not Luton.
Yes, but he sees this as a trend. Okay, look, I don't want to. I'm not
that abuse happens in all different communities. Yeah, that's a trend. Yeah,
well,
but why is he reserving his fury for just Muslims? Is it perhaps because he has a problem with Muslims and not so much, but doesn't really seem that bothered when white people do it, relatively speaking?
I don't. Islam is not a race thing, so it's not.
Are you really going to make that pedantic objection?
That's a real thing.
Do you think Islam? No, because people in turbans get attacked as Islams. I have been attacked by Islamophobes because my name is Middle Eastern. No, there's no Muslim connection to me at all. Do you think Islamophobes know the difference between A Muslim and a non-Muslim? No, they go for brown people typically.
Look, the difference between disliking a race versus an idea is a significant one. Do you not agree?
Well, consequentially, the race gets affected anyway, so no.
I don't. Race does not get affected. The individual gets
Yes, it
affected.
does. Sikhs are victims of Islamophobia because they're brown. Hindu people, Indians, people
I
with
don't.
Middle Eastern names receive Islamophobic hatred. It is the race. It's not. That's why. I mean,
That's
you can
not
be
race.
okay. Okay, I'm sorry. Would you feel better if I called it anti-Muslim bigotry?
Yeah, sure, that's fine.
Okay. So Tommy Robinson, it's safe to say he's an anti-Muslim bigot.
Yeah, but Muslim. Well, I would say he's an anti-Islamic bigot.
Not bigoted.
He's an anti-Islamic bigot. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Bigot is a prejudicial dislike of a different opinion, and Islam would be a particular opinion.
Right. Assuming they all hold this opinion. I don't know exactly how many of these groomers did it because of Islam. I don't really know. What do you think they read it in the Quran? They read about child marriage and just said, "Oh fuck, I can't do that in this country. I might as well rape instead." I'd like
What?
as far as being helpful to the discussion or just grooming. Grooming gang is not something that is like it's not a valid crime type. If he was concerned, he would talk about child sexual exploitation, find out that most of that's done in the UK
Okay.
is not done by Muslims, and just go with that. Why does he always only show up when less than 5% of the offenders are involved?
The thing I was objecting to was you saying that he seemed to care more about pinning this label of groomer on Muslims than he
Yeah,
cared
absolutely.
about.
Yeah, whenever someone says if you Google grooming gang, all you're going to get is Muslims.
Yeah, I know. The point is that you were saying that he cared more about doing that than he cared about the children being affected, and I don't think that's true.
Oh no, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what's going on in his head. It doesn't. But to me, it doesn't matter. He could be 100% just about the children, just caring about just does it because he doesn't like seeing kids get hurt. It doesn't matter. Consequentially, he ends up hurting innocent people and doing nothing to help the victims. Yeah.
Okay, well that's fine. I don't have a problem with that criticism.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm trying to close the door. 1 sec. Okay. Okay, that's fine. I don't have an issue with that.
You want to go over any of the other ones, or I mean, well, actually, maybe I could ask you instead. Is I can't remember exactly what you wrote in the comment, but what is your issue with if I proposed that, as far as people who are sincerely interested in investigating these problems and in helping the victims and in bringing the perpetrators to justice, why? What is your problem with just using the academic and legal terminology and pursuing according to that rather than talking about Muslim grooming gangs? What is your problem if I just said scrap the term Muslim grooming gangs? It's not helpful. It's not criminologically useful. And we just go for group CSE and individual CSE.
It dismisses the possibility that Islam is in fact a contributing factor.
Okay. No, it doesn't. If someone ends up abusing a child because they think Islam told them to, then that would show up in that would show up in a court case or something. But it does not dismiss the possibility that Islam is a contributing factor. Do you think we need to make a special term for abuse in the Catholic Church for the same reason? Because
No,
for them, it's just CSE.
I think your point. That's fine. So, well, then we don't have to take. We can scrap the term grooming gang. I'm fine with that. But there remains the issue and the question of whether or not there's a cultural clash here, and whether or not this has something to do with it.
Cultural clash.
Yeah.
What do you mean a cultural clash?
Between the Muslim world and the Western world.
Because they abuse children sometimes?
No, that would be the backdrop that gives people cause for concern over these kinds of things, right? I mean, it's hard to measure the effect of a culture, but that's nonetheless an issue.
Right. I mean, it depends on, because I mean, as far as I've seen with research, like Muslim migrants to the UK tend to be much more accepting of liberal values than their counterparts around the world. So I don't really, I'd say that's possibly happening. I mean, we could talk about how we go about integration of people from that part of the world. I mean, I think, well, for one thing I could suggest is that the fact that they've come to the UK where they know all this permissive and liberal stuff happens compared to living back in a more conservative Islam theocracy or somewhere like a more conservative society would say enough about them. But yeah, we could probably talk about. It's a very different issue, which I haven't looked that much.
Well,
into.
I don't think it is a very different issue. It's a broader issue, perhaps, but there's no reason to think that it isn't connected.
Well, no, I mean, I don't know if you ever, when you were doing research on the grooming gangs, I think I didn't bring this up in the video. This was something I came up with, I found out later, was the Drew report of the investigation into the South Yorkshire police as to the whole thing about why this happened. And did you come across that?
No, maybe I don't know the names of the studies.
It was the one where where they basically found out that one of the big problems with why they let this abuse happen for so long was because of a complete failure of the police to communicate with the Muslim community, because they were only ever investigating or speaking to Muslims either when they were when they were accusing people of grooming or when they were looking into terrorism. They didn't really have much of a relation with the community that police at least otherwise have a margin of when it comes to locals. So that breakdown of communication between the state and between the migrants, which is dating back to a very long tradition of policies like community cohesion and prevent, which basically force Muslim populations to become insular because it's basically the state's way of telling them that they're not particularly welcome.
I don't think this is a one-sided issue. I think it takes two to tango in this case. Like, there's an insular impulse in all migrant communities for obvious reasons, and that's something I don't see why we put all the blame on the existing culture and not some of it on.
Oh, I'm not putting all the blame on the existing culture. It's just that, like, I mean, I personally, I was born and raised here. Like, I come from the existing culture, so that's what it would be very strange of me to start making judgments about the Muslim community in particular, because I just don't know them that well. Like, I don't really know that much about them, and also because like, you can't really advocate for policy within the Muslim community. They don't really have that kind of power. If we can address things that are systemically affecting them and encouraging insular behavior, like community cohesion, then we can address that. I think the Labour and Conservative governments alike over the last 20 years have, you could predict with pretty decent accuracy that that would force Muslims to become insular because it treats them as dangerous outsiders. Not to mention the press. I mean, the press has they've got quite a lot to answer for with the way that they treat Muslims.
It's all still from the perspective of, Muslim migrants being put upon by existing structures. Like, where's the individual responsibility of them in this?
What do you mean the individual responsibility? I can't mandate more personal responsibility on behalf of the Muslim population. What do you want me to say?
What do they have a responsibility to engage in community outreach and actually engage with other people?
Well, they do. I don't know if you've noticed, but every time there's a terrorist attack in the UK, like, every Muslim community leader comes out, and then people come and offer their support to Sorry?
There is an obligation there, right?
Doesn't matter if there's not, but they do it. And also, the best people, when it comes to outing potential extremists within the community, the people who have performed best to that have been Muslims in the UK.
Look, I'm not saying that they're not doing that. My point is, I'm just trying to establish where the responsibility lies here, and I just want to confirm whether you think that is their obligation. Their obligation is, in fact, to engage in community outreach.
Yeah. Well, but when it comes to responsibility, I would tend to target the group that has the power, and Muslims don't really have state power in the UK. So,
okay, but we're talking about, like, are the local police supposed to be constantly interviewing people, or is it more about reporting and the community is supposed to come to the police and talk to them about crimes?
It depends, because if you're constantly treated as suspect by the police, I don't know if you've seen what happens to Muslims at the hands of the police, but, like, kids getting detained and for just joking about terrorism in a classroom discussion, like, it's actually the same reason that abuse victims are reluctant to go to the police, because it's just the most intimidating, cold environment possible to go after you've just been after you've been assaulted. So yeah, similar. I wouldn't have a go at the victims for not speaking to the police
I'm not
either.
having a go at victims. I'm talking about the community as a whole who are supposed to report these things.
Yeah,
People who are
well,
not.
how do you? I mean, like it depends on how far back you go, because it wasn't all that long ago where if you were a Muslim in the UK, you were just you had the National Front on your doorstep, and then after that, it wasn't too long ago when British
I don't.
unions were basically colluding with bosses to keep Asian workers out of particular jobs, or
I
where
don't
they
think
were.
Front would object too strongly to Muslims reporting crimes in their communities.
Sorry.
I don't think the National Front would object too strongly to Muslims reporting crimes in their communities.
So it doesn't matter if that's yeah. It doesn't matter if they're okay with that. It's everything else they did that was not
Reporting
particularly ideal for Muslims.
reporting things to the police is tough for everybody. Like we still have to do it. That's still the
Do you think
responsibility.
it's more, or do you think it's just as tough for a Muslim as it would be for like a white person?
Well, I wouldn't know.
Okay. I guess we just
And
have to ask them how they feel, and generally they say that they do feel like a difficulty when it comes to that, and I don't think they're paranoid for some random reason.
that's fine. Then that's an area for improvement, I suppose.
Right. So first of all,
It,
here's I'm just trying to kind of summarize like a little bit, but like so my argument is if we want to make it easier for Muslims to come forward with things like issues of terrorism or child abuse and things like that, then I would suggest maybe policies like community cohesion have been a complete failure, prevent strategy complete failure, you letting the mainstream press spread massive disinformation or almost unanimously negative stories about Muslims, and allowing groups like who perpetuate narratives like grooming gangs and such should probably be taken down a peg. Policies that have failed for 20 years should probably be scrapped. I mean, these are just a few of my suggestions. What are yours?
okay, you see how that kind of approach, like I don't agree with it inherently, but people take offense at that approach when they think, because it sounds like we're supposed to be more concerned with offending the Muslim community sensibilities than we are with crimes like grooming gangs and
I
things
don't
like
care
that.
about who am I offending. I'm just talking about something that works, like something that would have a broad, like policy, like a broad sweeping policy. I think like policies generally affect the world, so yeah, that's what I would do. What do you want? What do you want to do?
Or what do I want to do to encourage community cohesion? I don't have a problem with that.
I mean, community cohesion, I mean, is separate from the policy. I mean, the policy of community cohesion is not. I mean, it's failed to produce community cohesion, so it's kind of a, it's a very Orwellian term, to be honest. But yeah, that's why I've suggested a few policy changes or maybe approaches to narrative, as well as obviously in terms of criminological studies, just completely scrapping the word grooming gang. I think that would be very helpful as well, because it would stop. It would at least do something to discredit people who are convinced that this is a specifically Muslim problem, or that it's even massively overrepresented by Muslims. And the fact that even just with like your average person, that it almost gives this people like an immediate association with the word, to immediately associate the word grooming with Muslim, which is not borne out in anything. Like turns out basically anyone, like all racial and religious groups do grooming to about the same degree.
Okay, that's fine. What do we do, for example, if Muslim communities are resistant to things like community cohesion?
They should be. Do you mean the policy or just as an idea?
As an idea, what if they don't want to integrate into British culture?
And what aspect of British culture? Like, I don't really integrate with parts of British culture. Like, I used to break the law a lot as a teenager. I'm joking, obviously. What do you mean?
Well, that's a hard thing to define. Like British culture more generally, but well, the statistic I'm thinking of is from a book by a guy called Eric Kaufman called White Shift. But 25%, something like 25% of Muslims in Britain do not identify as British.
I don't care.
You don't care.
Yeah. Do you know how many Scottish people don't identify as British? Like,
Okay, but you don't think that's but these people are living in Britain, right? And they're not a separate nation like Scotland. They're not. Are they going to secede from the union or what?
I mean, if the identity, if them identifying as British, you would need to actually translate that into some kind of phenomenological reality as to some kind of like actually tangible consequence. What exactly is wrong with people who come here not identifying as British?
But they're living in Britain.
So they can still can you not live here and not identify as British?
You can.
I'm pretty sure the answer they tend to give in the census is like British Pakistani or British Asian or something.
That's a failure of integration if you don't identify as British.
Why?
Because you should identify with the country you live in.
No, well, I mean, what if they're like anti-nationalists? What if they're egalitarians, or if they're like socialists and not like that? There's a lot of things. What if they just don't like nationalism? What if they don't like identifying with any nation? Would that be again? I'd like you to elaborate on that. It's like, how does that actually affect people's well-being? How does that affect British people? Like, how does it affect me if my like Russian neighbor doesn't identify as British?
Well, we're talking about culture and ideas. It's not.
Yeah, so culture. So I would go for a particular like cultural
I
point.
don't know to measure that out. No one does.
I mean, there are people who identify as British who do lots of things that I wouldn't consider particularly British.
Okay, but like the loss of a common identity is a big issue. It creates a lot of suspicion and general lack of cohesion and everything else in any given country.
I don't know so much about common. I mean, common values. Yeah, like that's why I guess that's why we have like a common. That's why we have a law and everything.
You know, minor common values like the value of democracy and secularism.
Okay, like separation. Yeah, so secularism as in like separation of church and state. Yeah.
So. Yeah. So what if segments of the population do not agree with that value? Do you think that's a problem?
If they don't agree, I mean, I don't like it that they don't agree with it, but they're allowed to not agree with. Like, well, if people living in the UK don't believe in democracy, but again, some British people don't believe in democracy. An entire 60 million Americans currently don't seem to believe in democracy as a concept. So, but they're still Americans. They're still allowed to live there.
How many people have to stop believing in democracy before it becomes a problem?
Well, probably the majority. I don't know, like quite a lot, probably. But yeah, I mean, like again, is this a Muslim problem? Do most Muslims who live here not believe in democracy?
Well, they're coming from a culture that, broadly speaking, does not believe in democracy.
Yeah, they've left a country that isn't a democracy to live in a democracy. Yeah.
Well, it's a culture they've been raised in. You don't think? I mean, do you think that as soon as they step foot onto British land, that they internalize all of British values? I don't think that.
Well, I'd imagine that they have some kind of affinity to Britain before they've decided to move here.
Well, I'm not convinced that would be the case at all. Many move for simply economic opportunity or as refugees.
Okay, and still, again, like, do you have proof that most Muslims living in the UK don't believe in democracy?
I never claimed that most didn't.
Okay, so what's the problem?
The concern is that many don't because they're from a radically different culture.
Okay, so what do? All right.
A real concerted effort to integrate.
Well, then why do British Muslims have more liberal values than Muslims who live in Saudi Arabia and Pakistan?
Because they're moving into a culture that is more democratic. So obviously, more of them are going.
So it's almost like moving here does affect their culture. That's integration, isn't it?
Being more liberal in Saudi Arabia is a really low bar. Like that's not outstanding news.
I mean, I don't know if you are aware, but like, do you know how many like fascist parties we've had over the last few decades? Like, there are plenty of like British citizens, people who identify as British, who don't give a fuck about democracy. So why should we place this extra burden on Muslims that we don't place on our own?
Well, we do place that burden on our own. We don't look kindly on fascists, do we?
Not fascists, no.
No, not at all.
And again, if there were Muslims living here who wanted Britain to stop being a democracy, I'd have a problem with them as well. But I don't see why first of all, I don't see what that has to do with them not identifying as British. You can be against democracy and still identify as British. I'm just wondering where the connection is.
They're all symbolic. Or not symbolic. They're all representative of a lack of integration.
So this is a feeling.
Well, how do you measure culture? I don't know how else you want to describe it.
Well, you're not really being that specific about what about their culture that you're massively bothered by.
they're coming from cultures that are anti-democratic.
Yeah, they're coming from like a country. I don't think it's their fault that they were born in or raised in a country that's anti-democratic. What matters is how they behave when they're here. I don't see like a mass movement of British Muslims trying to actively subvert democracy. You could,
Well,
the Liberal
for
Democrats,
example,
you could probably say, like, I'd say they're, as far as groups that are trying to subvert democracy, you could have a go at them for that. You'd have
well,
a stronger case against them than you'd have against Muslims.
talking about Tommy Robinson, there's in his hometown of Luton, there were regular marches of radical fundamentalist Islamists who want the British government to stop being democratic.
Yeah, and they should be not looked on kindly either. Yeah, of course. Yeah, if there are radical Muslims here who do think that Britain shouldn't be democratic, they should be dealt with. Yeah.
And Deobandis, who are the majority sect in British mosques, are anti-democratic. They're religious.
Do you have a source for that with the British mosques? Because this isn't really synchronizing with my understanding of mosques in Britain.
Sorry?
Do you have a what's your source for that out of interest? I'm not saying I don't believe you. I just wanted to see.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, there's one scholar called Bassam Tibi. He's a Syrian guy. He's living in Germany at the moment. And then there's another, as a summary, there's an article by The Spectator called "Who Runs Our Mosques?"
Okay, can you send me a link in Discord if you want?
Yeah, sure.
Who runs our Spectator? That's a good start. Okay, let's have a look.
Yeah, but the political.
I'm not gonna have a massive go at The Spectator. Let's see. Professor T. Let's. Actually, I'll just. As the Muslim population became more established, one might have assumed that a westernized form of Islam would have come to dominate Britain's mosques. According to a database of British Islam, however, only 2 out of 1,700 mosques in Britain follow modernist interpretations of the Quran. It's not the same elsewhere in the West. In 2011, a survey of Islam in the United States, 50% an interpretation of Islam adapted to modern circumstances. This is not happening in Britain. Spent my spare time traveling. For the past 7 years, I've spent my spare time traveling around the UK, talking to Islamic leaders and grassroots followers, trying to find out more about the structure of Islam in Britain. I hope that's not their research method. In the main, I have been treated with courtesy and often warmth. As a liberal, however, it took some getting welcomed. Okay. Deobandis. Right, so it looks like I'm just glancing really quickly at Deobandis here. It looks like it's just a branch of Sunni Islam.
Yeah.
And then there are subsets of that are extremist, but Deobandi itself, I don't actually know from here. And again, I'm just gonna assume that this is true. I'm just gonna assume everything in this article is true because I think we can. Again, how much influence do you think British mosques have over British Muslims? Okay. Like, do you have anything that can show that? Because my understanding of like every bit of research I've done on Muslims in the UK is that Mosques are
So
basically like a
you're
dying
kind of cutting
thing.
out there. What
So
that can show what? Sorry,
like the influence of because like everything
can
I've
you hear me?
yeah, do you hear me? Have I gone? I can see myself, I can see my meter moving, but I don't know if you can. I can hear him, but I don't know if he can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you. You're breaking up there a lot. I didn't really catch most of what you just said.
All right, let's start the call. How about now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so as for, I'm just going to assume all of this is true. I'll probably read a bit more later. But what I want to know is, like, every bit of research I've done when it comes to British Muslims is that mosques are not where most people who live here, like Muslims who live here, get their get taught about their faith. It's the same as like Christians in churches. I mean, like I was brought up Catholic, but like the amount I learned from a church was like what, nothing basically. So because most young Muslims, when they're wanting to learn about their faith, is they're much more susceptible to the works of online preachers and basically like very modernized, like very kind of like charismatic younger speakers rather than these kind of like necrotic imams and same as like priests who just kind of have no way of reaching the youth. So I would say that this isn't really like indicative of anything. I'd need to see like some kind of social trend
Okay,
rather than.
so I don't like. We kind of touched on this already, but the fact that the young people don't go to mosques doesn't mean they're not being influenced by the beliefs of radical
Yeah, so
fundamentalists.
what's like I need to see, do you have any just like examples of social trends that show that there's like that Muslims are not like doing well at are not doing their bit to be part of the be okay living in the UK? Because like it seems that they're mostly fine, like most
Do
of
I have
them,
any?
like pretty much all of them. Yeah.
Well, I said already, 25% don't identify as British.
I don't care if they don't identify as Brit. 25, that's quite low. Yeah, 25%. Yeah, I don't care that they don't identify as British. Why does that matter? That has to,
I
you
don't.
have to link that to something. Yeah, that has to cause something for that to be a problem.
Okay. That has to cause something. Well, it causes any number of things. I don't know what much it causes.
Well, what then? Like, I don't know if it maybe it upsets you, but I don't care. Like, like I don't identify as British. I barely identify as Scottish. I think nationalism's dumb. So, like, but as far as integrating, that doesn't affect the way I am with people around me, and I guess it would probably be the same with Muslims. Like, is this something you want to know when you're talking to a Muslim, like whether they identify as British? Does that matter to you?
It's not something I want to know when I'm talking to them. That's not the point. What do you think of things like the recent terror attacks in Europe and stuff like that? Is that nothing to do with Islam? Is that nothing to do with a lack of integration?
Yeah, that possibly, yeah. That's got a lot to do. It's got a lot to do with quite a few different factors. I mean, I could still put that down to failure of the state to
Really?
adequately address these problems.
Do
Yeah.
you really do you really think that?
Yeah, because the biggest exporter of Islamic extremism on earth is Saudi Arabia, and we give them weapons and we fund them. So yeah, I think I think our actions are pretty involved in that. Yeah.
You think that that we've asked for it or something?
Um, I'd say our state has partially asked for it. Yeah.
But it still matter what our state asked for it because our civilians are the ones being targeted.
Yeah, the civilians don't ask for it at all. No, definitely not. But yeah, that's just
So
that's the very unfortunate consequence. But I would be when I'm having these discussions, I would actually like to talk about like what we can do about these things,
what
not
we can do
like.
about terrorism.
Sorry,
Well,
what can we do to fight terrorism?
yeah, well, it's saying that it's all just the state failing to integrate these people. Like a lot of these terrorists are traveling across borders to buy weapons and then back again to commit the act of terror. Like this is a motivated act. It's not a failure of integration.
I mean, it depends on the particular act. I mean, like the Manchester bombing, that was completely the state's fault. Like they just let someone who was a known extremist travel safely across borders because he was useful to them in the Libyan war. As far as the Taliban and goes, obviously we funded them for decades.
Was an extremist.
Sorry?
Is it their fault that he was an extremist?
No, it's not their fault he was an extremist, but it was their fault that he was able to do what he did. Yeah.
His extremism is the problem.
Sorry?
His extremism is the problem, isn't that?
Okay, what do we do about extremism then?
We we have to have a check on it. We can't allow it to be
Don't
preached.
be vague. What do you want to do? I've given you a bunch of suggestions. What do you want us to do about this?
I'm just trying to have a conversation about that. I'm not a policy writer. I don't know.
Okay, well,
That you acknowledge that it's a problem. That's what I want.
so you think that, yeah, I mean, of course I'm going to acknowledge extremism as a problem. What,
Yeah.
Did you think I was going to sit here and say, like, no, don't worry about that?
I'm deflecting, saying it's just our fault.
I'm not deflecting, saying it's just our fault. I'm suggesting things that we've done that if we hadn't done might not have exacerbated the problem.
That's a deflection.
That's not a deflection. We are involved in perpetuating extremism. Our
If you
our
cut-
policies influence the world quite heavily, yes. Sorry?
If you cut someone's head off, that's no one's responsibility but your own.
Well, then no one can do anything about it then, can't we? If it's just if it's just the responsibility of the beheader, then what can anyone do?
It stopped them from being extremists.
Then that is someone else's problem. If who's going to stop them from being extremists?
They're making it our problem. I didn't say it's not our problem. It's their responsibility. Their responsibility is to not behead people first and foremost. You can talk about secondary responsibilities of the state, but the first and foremost responsibility falls on the individual who's a radical.
So if a white Scottish person beheads another white Scottish person, and we say, well, maybe there's a problem, maybe the police should have been more responsive or whatever, like, you would say, no, it's the responsibility of the person who did the beheading and no one else's. Or maybe say there's a massive beheading problem in, like, Dundee, and we should probably address it. Like,
yeah.
Then what would we do? We'd look at policies. We would look at what the police could do. We would look at what happens with the youth. We could look at opportunities, education, all the kind of things that relate to crime and extremism in the first place.
That's ridiculous. You would look at what is their motivation?
What is their motivation?
Motivating factor.
This is what we do with, and then what do we find out? When we find out what their motivation is, then what? Like, say if we have a crime problem, like say, well, I mean, Glasgow, that was the murder capital of Europe. What did we do there? What did we ask what the motivation was of the criminals, or did we address things that
those were crime of opportunity, not crimes of ideology?
And what did we do? And so but how did we address it?
You addressed it through policy reform, because that's an issue of poverty and general social trend. It's not they didn't scream Allahu Akbar before doing it.
Right. So do you know that most like extremists in Europe get radicalized in Europe, right?
Yeah, and
so that's something that we can affect, right? I've given you a bunch of suggestions here. I'm just wondering, like, why are you so reluctant to offer any options for us? Like,
what do you mean?
We both want to stop terrorism. Like, I fucking hate terrorism. Fuck those guys. I've given a few suggestions for what we can do about it. Where are yours?
I don't have policies. Okay, you're talking about. You seem to be denying the fact that this is a motivated ideology. That is a problem.
I never. When did I say it wasn't motivated by ideology?
Yes, that we just look at things like schooling and whatever other broad society-wide policy issues we can apply. Like, that's just
because that like people become susceptible to ideologies for different reasons. Yeah.
That's not relevant. Are we going to wait for the entirety of society to change over time after some policies are implemented, or are we going to address the root of the problem, which is the ideology?
What do you mean address the problem then? Okay, you're saying we want to address the problem. Then give me a suggestion. Tell us how are we going to address the problem?
Do you first of all say that? Do you acknowledge that we should address that?
Yeah, of course we should address that. Like, come on, help me. Help us stop. Give me. This is your opportunity to tell a bunch of people how to stop extremism. Go on. Address the problem. Do it.
That's not
quick. We don't have much time.
I don't. If I had the cure-all for extremism, I'd be fucking rich. Okay, the problem is not stopping all forms of extremism. It's about preventing the current forms of extremism that exist from being able to carry out attacks.
And how do we do that?
Well, France, for example, has had raids on Islamist organizations because the Islamist organizations are the ones preaching the ideology.
Okay. And I'm pretty sure we do that here. We're pretty aggressive with anyone who show signs of extremism in the UK. Yeah, we do that.
Yeah, but that's the problem. Okay, yeah, but then there's also that's. Do you think that that's a good idea?
And in part, I think sometimes they're pretty bad at targeting because they are not very good at communicating with, like the way that, like when Shamima Begum and the other group, that was like 8 girls who left Bethnal Green that year. The only measure that was taken when people knew that radicalization was happening in the area was a very badly written pamphlet that her parents found in her backpack on the day she left. So, yeah, I think we could probably get a bit better at cooperating with the majority of Muslims who actually are against extremism as well. The biggest victims and the biggest enemies of Islamic extremism are other Muslims. It would be helpful to maybe check in with them and maybe be a bit more and not be so aggressive with them unless they've actually shown signs that they're going to do something wrong.
You say that they're the biggest victims
Around the world, yeah.
not around the world in Europe. Not they're not the biggest victims in Europe, are they?
No.
No.
So,
So, so this cooperating with other Muslims is only good insofar as it gets them to report on other Muslims. It's not like, why are you trying to portray the Muslim community as the victim in every single possible situation?
I'm not trying to. Well, because the broader Muslim community is generally victimized. That's why.
That's ridiculous.
Why? What I can give you some examples.
No, I don't need examples. The Muslim world is not a helpless babe, being.
I'm talking about, but we're talking about Muslim communities at home. I thought we were talking about. Didn't you say that?
Yeah, but you then talked about on the global stage. You're saying Muslim communities.
Well, yeah, we can say on the global stage as well. I mean, Western foreign policy in the last 20 years has not been particularly good to the average Muslim. No.
Okay, and it had nothing to do with it, like, I suppose.
What?
And I suppose the Muslim world just had no say in any of this.
Well, considering that 1 in 49 out of 50 drone strikes killed civilians, given that most of the deaths in the Iraq War were civilians, yeah.
That's not the problem. I don't see what that has to do with anything.
Weren't you just talking about like that whether or not the Muslim world had anything to do with it? I'm saying that we killed innocent people, hundreds of thousands of innocent people. That is going to have ramifications.
Yeah, and they fund terrorist organizations around the world. Like,
what, the people who died?
No, the Muslim world, places like Iran, Iraq.
Yeah, they're states, not their civilians. We mostly killed civilians. That matters. That has an impact. What the biggest, like when it comes to radicalization, the biggest argument that extremists will give is to people like that is that the West hates them, and we don't really do ourselves any favors by giving them that argument.
The West does not deliberately target civilians.
Doesn't matter if we. Do you think they care? Do you think the fucking shepherd whose like family just got blown up by a drone cares whether or not we meant it? You don't get off the hook for like fucking up.
Do you think Robinson's family cares about the what was meant by these people?
Don't fucking pivot, man. Come on.
Well, I'm asking you because that's a hypocritical line of reasoning. If you're not going to.
Okay, ask the question. Go on.
Okay. Hello.
Yeah, you're there. Yeah, go on.
What did you say?
You were gonna pivot to Tommy Robinson, but go ahead.
I'm not trying to pivot. I will get back to your question. My point is, you are making an argument that they just couldn't contain. They just couldn't, like that. The extenuating circumstances are all that they need to consider. When that's something that you did not accept when it came to Tommy Robinson.
What extenuating circumstances made Tommy Robinson the way he is?
The fact that he sees his own community getting the shame, that's the extenuating circumstance.
Yeah, most people who come from Luton don't do what Tommy Robinson does. He's a pretty special case, I'd say.
Well, people in the Muslim world don't go out and commit terrorist acts either, but we're looking at the people who do, right? Like, do you think the Ayatollah in Iran cares that no Western civilians had anything to do with the drone strikes when he funds terrorist organizations that attack civilians?
Oh no, he doesn't give a shit. No, but I'd imagine the civilians who end up getting radicalized because of partly because of Western foreign policy would do. Yeah, I mean this was so like predictable. Like, it wasn't the hotspot for one of the hotspots for the rise of ISIS in amongst 20-somethings in northern Iraq, i.e., people who grew up during the Iraq War. I mean, this is predictable. This is a predictable consequence.
Well, it wasn't predictable at the time, but you can say that it's predictable. It doesn't mean it's excusable or that that the West's role in the Middle East's current condition in any way justifies terror attacks. It doesn't.
It doesn't justify it, but it explains it, and it also is a pretty strong case for why a war that shouldn't have been done anyway, regardless of the consequences. Yeah, that again, like, I don't care whether or not it's excusable. It's whether or not it's going to happen or not.
Okay.
So again, yeah, I think the argument was basically Islamic extremism very bad. We both agree. What do you want to do about it? And it doesn't have to be a policy. It can just be like a, I don't know, a social convention or something like that, like something that the average person could do, or something that advocates can do, or pressure groups.
Well, let me think. I mean, whenever you, like, any kind of radical preacher or radical mosque, you know, a radical imam or anything like that should be investigated, surely.
Yeah, I think we have a tendency to do that. Like, people get in trouble for a lot less than radical preaching.
Mhm.
People get in trouble for like reading books about Hamas, even though their lecturer at university told them to do it. So that's something that we're already doing. I agree. Next.
Well, other issues are like the guy in France, was it Tunisian guy who like flew, you know, crossed the border over to France to commit the terror act. Like, there needs to be better, there needs to be tighter security on the borders.
Okay.
That's another policy.
Tighter security on the borders. Okay. Like, well,
Yeah.
just like better checks for whether or not people are terrorists. Okay.
Yeah, investigating people's backgrounds, things like that.
I'm pretty sure we do that quite a lot anyway, but yeah, I'm guessing.
Well, clearly not enough. Or another problem is the Schengen zone in the EU, in Europe.
Okay.
Allows free travel between borders. Like, not at the moment because of COVID, obviously, but at the time.
We're not part of the Schengen zone, though, are we? The UK.
No, well, not anymore, obviously. But
I don't think we were during. No, I don't think we were part of Schengen. Were we part of Schengen before Brexit?
I'm not actually sure. I'd have to check that, but I don't know.
What does Schengen have to do with Islamic extremism, though?
It's the fact that there are no checks at the borders for between countries that allows these people to buy arms in one country and then commit acts of terror in another, and things like that.
Okay, I don't really know that many examples of people doing that, but okay. So what
Well,
should we have done instead? Like, just have like. So you don't want free movement in Europe because some of them might be terrorists across borders.
I don't know about a sweeping denial of free movement, but there certainly needs to be some sort of adjustment in that policy.
Okay. Wouldn't the fact that again, this is like with respect to the victims and everything, wouldn't the fact that these attacks are still very rare mean that quite a lot of this is already being done? Like, you can't, like, I mean, obviously we have very good measures for stopping murderers, but we're going to have murderers.
Not nearly rare enough. Like, you know, in the last 10 years, there's been an absurd amount of terror attacks for any country.
Let me check. I know in America this is something that often gets just like skewed by the press because the.
But in America, it's nowhere near as big an issue as it is in Europe. They get paltry amount of terror attacks.
European terror deaths by ideology. I think you're probably right. I know in America that like almost all deaths by based on ideology are far right extremism. Europe's not far off actually for far right extremists. I wonder how it compares to Muslims. Terrorism studies are always so fucking complex. Okay, so far you've advocated for basically, I suppose, like what, strengthening a few policies that already exist, and it's all like reactive policies. I guess you could say react.
So I'm what? Sorry, I'm advocating for
so like a lot of these policies are ones that already exist, right? Basically.
Yeah, the structure structures there. Yeah.
So what's your so yeah, that's kind of why I don't really go too far. Like I don't yeah, I could say maybe they should like double check the passports or the backgrounds at the airports and all that. But I don't see why you're bothered by me talking about community cohesion and the fact that we fund Saudi Arabia and the fact that our policy interventions in the Middle East are directly linked to radicalization, or that are allowing for the mainstream press and for far right groups to alienate Muslim populations. I don't know why you're bothered about me mentioning all those things when your solutions are, in large part, just slightly enhancing ones that already exist. Like, why were you bothered by me bringing up those suggestions?
Because the implication there is that we're to blame.
I don't care about the implication, though. It's just whether or not it works. And we know that there has been such a thing. Sorry?
Decision. You're talking about huge. The West's relationship with Saudi Arabia. Like, are we supposed to throw that away?
I don't know exactly what I mean. Selling arms. I don't know exactly how that would like if we need to do that.
Well,
like, I mean, Saudi Arabia. Like, if you're talking about our relationship with Saudi Arabia, yeah, like the biggest exporter of Islamic extremism. Yeah, I would say that that's something that probably needs to be addressed. The biggest exporter of extremism.
Yeah, well, I think I would not be. I mean, I would not be against, imposing penalties on Saudi Arabia. But the problem is that Saudi Arabia, the Middle East, as I'm sure you know, is exceedingly complicated. So Saudi Arabia is one of the West's few staunch allies in the region on broader issues like the Israel-Palestine question and things like that. So we're kind of in a catch-22 there. It's not so simple as just pissing them off with sanctions.
Yeah, and I mean what they also like used arms to invade Bahrain and attack peaceful protesters and kill people down there. So I don't know about the whole like Israel Palestine's a completely different discussion that I dive into. But yeah, I mean I would say that is one thing that's worth addressing, but locally as well. I mean these far like the presence of far right groups in the UK and the attitude of the mainstream press makes it very difficult for allowing these kind of things as well. Sure. Especially, I don't know if you know, like the aftermath of Rotherham, what happened there.
So they make it difficult to allow what kind of things?
They make integration difficult. They make people like scared to speak out publicly. That's why I guess like British Muslims don't really have a very loud voice in the UK because they're just.
I'm not debating that radicalization helps no one, and far right radicalization is the same as any. But did far right radicalism exist already, or was it a reactionary thing?
Well, no, you seem a lot more defensive of the radicalization that comes from someone like Tommy Robinson than you do from Muslims, because Tommy Robinson does radicalize people. He was binge watched by people who went out and committed terror attacks, like basically just when he was the only thing in their search history. Like he radicalizes people all the time. The EDL would just attack Muslims completely indiscriminately.
He's
based on rhetoric that came from Tommy Robinson.
There's a difference between actually telling people that they should commit acts of violence and become radicalized, and these people simply absorbing your content and becoming radicalized because of their own biases. That's totally different.
Well, Muslim extremists dog whistle as well. That's part of the problem. That's why Tommy Robinson gets really angry about them, because they don't have to directly incite violence. Like every hate preacher does this. Hate preachers are dumb as fuck if they say, they're like, you don't go into these mosques and there's just some fucking nutter with a machine gun saying like, go out and kill the white infidels. Like, no, they're subtle the same way that people like Tommy Robinson, I mean, they say subtle, but they say everything they can to incite violence without actually inciting violence. So you'd have to let that, apply that standard on both ends. Because
they point to scholars like Qaradawi or Qutb, people like from the Muslim Brotherhood or Islamists, who, in their own writings, justify suicide bombings against civilians and things like this, and say that a death from an act of terror is a martyrdom and all shit like this.
You get the really obvious ones, but then actually also if you get if you found Islamic hate preachers in mosques who were maybe going a bit more cautious than that and just talking very poetically about the crimes of the West and things, and like talking about Western infidels, but not actually inciting violence, I would say that needs to be addressed as well. because Muslim extremists can dog whistle just as much as European ones. So I don't know why you wouldn't be on board with also attacking people who are basically increasing the chances of violence with their rhetoric, but just not directly inciting. I'd say that's a problem regardless of who does it.
I don't like this. I don't agree with this notion that speech alone increases the likelihood of violence.
It absolutely does. Yeah, completely.
Like, I don't.
Like, I don't know if you know, like Reverend Ian Paisley, like basically every time he gave like speeches, then people would like not only start terrorist groups that claimed to be inspired by him, they would also quote him, and they would refer to his rhetoric, because his rhetoric was inflammatory. It was like very Old Testament style, but he could always put his hands up and just say, nothing, I never incited violence, which he didn't. But you do have to notice a kind of pattern emerging here when you see the same rhetoric being used. Again, this is the kind of the same argument you're using. This is ideology. This is the same rhetoric being used by groups who are inspired by very specific people.
We're broaching the topic of free speech here, really, aren't we?
Kind of, yeah. But also, I mean, it relates, I suppose, to the idea of Islamic and far right hate preachers. I mean, would you be okay with like a very anti-Western Islamic hate preacher who just never incited violence, but just basically said, you know, just dog whistled it? Like, you know how dog whistling works, right? Would you be okay with letting a Muslim like preacher do that?
Yeah, he's not doing anything illegal. I wouldn't like him personally, and I would certainly take issue with his ideas, but I wouldn't legally persecute him for that.
So so it turns out I'm more of an iron fist with Islamic extremism than you are in that regard.
No, that's simply because I don't want to pervert the principle of free speech in the name of cracking down on a particular.
But that does happen. Like people who are radicalized don't always get radicalized by people who preach for violence.
Sorry, say it again.
People who get radicalized don't always get taken in by people who preach for violence. I know, as far as we know, with Shamima Begum's case, like she was radicalized by promises of just like being a bride and like community and stuff like that. She wasn't. I don't think she was. There was any evidence of her being told that she'll get to see beheaded people. That was kind of something that happened when she arrived there.
ISIS bride is like ISIS is absolutely dripping with radical violence. You can't avoid that.
But depending on how much she saw when she was online, but yeah, I mean, so yeah, so like generally speaking, like you're okay with like hate preachers so long as they don't actually incite violence.
Generally speaking, I'm going to say yes. Yeah.
Okay. I think we're coming up to an hour and a half. Okay. I don't really know if I've got anything else prepared, so it would just be all off the cuff, whatever. Do you have any other points? Any other thoughts?
I'll just have a look at my notes real quick, and I'll get back to you.
Yeah, take your time.
I suppose I'm still thinking about there's a complicated relationship between prominent voices in the Muslim world and radicals in the West. Like I'm thinking about the issuing of fatwas and things like that, with Salman Rushdie being attacked, or Vincent van Gogh being stabbed to death. Like they're people who are radicalized in Western countries, and then use the authority of figures in the Middle East and elsewhere to justify their actions. So I suppose, what's my question? Like these worlds are not so distinct as we've been kind of acting like they are through this conversation, but they're really not cut and dry distinct. Like, Muslims or Islam has a universal claim on its ideas. It's supposed to be the common denominator, the common factor that spreads between nations, just like Christianity is. So the goings on within Islam as a whole really can and really do affect Islam wherever it can be found in the world. Do you
Right.
think that?
Not see, in some regard, yeah, because like it depends, like because of mostly because of geopolitical factors, like what goes on in somewhere like Saudi Arabia and Iran will affect every other Muslim nation around it, because of the same way that every like Latin American country that opposed America. Opposed American imperialism had to side with the Soviet Union, because that was like otherwise they were alone. So I think with the Islamic world, though, again, just putting it like this whole like relation to Islam is, I think over the last 50, 60 years, coming up to 70 now, the Islamic world has kind of shown us that it is very capable of secularization and democracy and things like that. If you look at secular movements in Lebanon, Lebanon's only partially Muslim, but places like Syria, in Turkey, in even Iran, even Afghanistan, these countries, I don't know if you've ever seen what Iran looked like in the 50s, but they were led by a prime minister who took forced labor rights away from the Islamic nobility. He opened universities up to women. He introduced free elections. In Afghanistan, very similar. They had a pro-Western king as well as a local communist party. So, communism, the association with atheism. So the Islamic world has basically shown us that Islam does not breed this kind of behavior necessarily. I think what changed there in Afghanistan and Iran and places like that was, incidentally, it happened because of various geopolitical factors. Like Afghanistan has basically been radicalized constantly just because it's always been fought over since the days of like Alexander the Great. So I would say that these are geopolitical rather than inherent to I don't think Islamic extremists just sit there reading the Quran, finish, then close, and so, right, this is my mission. I must crush the infidel as this book says. Like, no, it's a massively complex network of social and economic and geopolitical factors that lead to this behavior, not just what's written in a 1,500-year-old book.
That's fine, but there is a cultural substrate to all this, and I would definitely disagree with that. The Muslim world is capable of embracing secularism, because the majority of the Muslim world is still very fundamentalist and autocratic. And
I'm saying you heard what I said there, though. You said like in the past they have shown. So in the like 1950s, 60s, Iran wasn't a sign of them, and that was the last time they ever made like a democratically elected government, and they elected a secularist, like a radical secularist.
In 1979, they were overthrown because the Islamic nobility would not accept the reforms.
Who was over? The secularists weren't overthrown. They overthrew the Shah, not the secularist. The secularist was overthrown by the CIA in 1953.
No, I'm talking about 1979.
Yeah, so in 1970 they didn't overthrow. Yeah, they overthrew the Shah, which was not a democratic secularist. He was a dictator. Yeah,
but he was a secularist.
Yeah, well, okay, like secularist in the sense of like, yeah, in the sense of that he turned Iran into basically like a hub for Western business, and like he was
grounds.
So that environment that produced, what I would say is, because like I come from a sociological background. When I look at social movements, I'd look at a number of different factors, including geopolitics and economics and education and what the state's doing and what's happening in neighboring countries. And I don't just look at the culture. Culture is one thing. Culture can shape society just as much as society shapes culture. And I would not say that the Shah was like, the overthrowing of the Shah was by people who were embracing secularism not 20 years earlier. So how can they, like, the fact that they were willing to do that, they were willing to democratically elect a secularist leader who took rights away from the Islamic nobility, who got rid of a massive network of Islamic state traditions and cultural traditions, then why that doesn't demonstrate that they're capable of secularization?
Let me explain myself. The Shah was overthrown by the Islamic nobility precisely because of secularizing reforms. Now, obviously, you say, as you rightly point out, there's also the fact that they didn't view him as legitimate; they viewed him as a Western infiltration point for Western culture. But that's in and of itself an indicator that these countries are not all hunky dory.
You don't think this anything? You don't think this had anything to do with the fact that they had a despotic dictator with a That they were
No,
that's what not what was the thing that was like the foot in the door for extremism, was because obviously if you live in a society that is under an iron boot by someone who has a secret police, who is basically engineering the economy to be entirely for foreign corporate interests, isn't maybe a more influencing factor to people than the
no,
religion of the nobles?
no, and it wasn't in this case because the Ayatollah Khomeini specifically appealed to a sort of Islamic populism to get elected, and
Yeah,
that's
he
exactly
appealed to populism. He appealed to anti-Westernism. But he wasn't only. Yeah, so Ayatollah Khomeini he was always like that. Okay, that was how he was. So
yeah, and
he wouldn't have had that. He did not have that ammunition in the 50s that he had in the 70s. Something changed. Something changed in those 20 years that allowed the ideas of Khomeini to become popular. And I would say being under the influence of a despot is quite a strong is quite a reasonable explanation for that.
yeah, but the despotism was portrayed as being synonymous with his Western values, and it was the appeal to Islamic populism. There was the claim that Islam, the religion of Islam, was what the people really wanted,
Yeah,
and that's what
exactly. So secularism just didn't really do a good job of selling itself in Iran because, well,
they
if they do you
said.
think so? What do you think would have happened out of interest then? So let's say the Shah never happened. Let's say Iran were actually just allowed to have the guy that they voted for. Do you think Khomeini would have had as much of an easy time overthrowing whatever Mossadegh as he would the Shah?
No, not as easy a time, but he would have always had the ammunition
Why?
because there was deep Shia roots in Iran. It's a very important part of
Even
it.
though the majority of those Shiites were voting against traditional Islamic law.
Say again, sorry.
Even though the majority of those Shiite Muslims were voting for secularism, were voting against traditional Islamic law and customs. All I'm saying is that incidents like, and okay, we can that's one example. Syria,
Yeah.
Turkey, Afghanistan. These are examples of the Islamic
Well,
world of showing you that it's not just because they're Muslim. It's to do with the fact it's to do with that there are other factors involved, and when you're looking at these situations, you need to understand them sociologically as a kind of network of social and economic influences,
also an
and not
example.
put so much stress on the religion itself.
Turkey is another example of the failure of the Muslim world to embrace secularism. Erdogan's party is an Islamist party. I mean, talk about the Arab Spring across the Muslim world. We're talking about the uprising of Islamists against democracy.
Yeah, again, and we're talking about now when the geopolitical situation just means that like there's a lot more influence, like there's like Saudi influence in there and all that. I'm talking about. So that's maybe a much more complicated point. So, and again, I mean, you could even make this argument for the because the same thing happened in like places that were kind of attempted secularization products in Uganda and Nigeria, but obviously they went to Christian fundamentalism. So again, I would say common denominator there is there's a really good documentary about this called God Strikes Back, which is about how in the 50s, the consensus among sociologists and social theorists was that secularization was the inevitable end everywhere, even in like places that are now massively Christian fundamentalist, like all those parts of America that we know for like the Westboro Baptist Church, and people who, if they had power, would be pretty fucking like adjacent to the extremists we know in Iran. So I would say that this has a lot more to do with a very broad network of social influence rather than just saying because of the particularities of their religion. Because obviously these were like monotheistic religions are not that different; they're very similar.
Okay, but are you aware that in Islam there's a very particular notion that Islam was perfect in the time of the Prophet, and ever since then it's been diluted, and that the ideal form of Islam, the ideal practice, is to return as closely as possible to the time of the Prophet. Like that's baked in retrograde conservatism in a religion. That's not something
Yeah,
that
and
Christian.
you get like I mean like I know that the originalist movement in America when it comes to the Amy Coney Barrett thing has a lot of similar takes when it comes to Christianity. It's the same, but again, I wouldn't say that's a Christian problem. I'd say that's a problem of social influences that allow those kind of ideas to flourish.
Hang on,
And our
Christianity is
leaders,
itself a
sorry?
reform movement. Christianity is born through reform. It is itself a reform of Judaism. Islam is not the same. It's not like that. It's
Well,
supposed.
no, I mean because like again, this is just like a bit more of a fundamental understanding that there's a lot more. There's a lot more to Islam than just like the original form. There's been reforms of there's excuse me, sorry.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of like reforms of Islamic ideology as well. Same with like even actually within mosques in Afghanistan um and fucking with Afghanistan and Iran, there was a lot of there was the same thing. There were reinterpretations and modern adaptations. Like no, like again, it's
One thing.
sorry.
I just want to clarify one thing. I'm not saying that Islam cannot reform because I think it can. It very much can. But the problem is that there is an inbuilt resistance to reform.
Okay. What? Just because of some things that were written a few thousand years ago.
Yeah, well, that's the basis of its scripture. Like
Yeah, I
that's
don't.
really.
I'm just not convinced that this is how humans work. Unfortunately, yeah, like
How do you mean?
because I just don't think that human societies like human societies don't shape themselves according to things that were written 1,500 years ago. They don't do that. They might like things in society might happen that might make particular ideas more attractive than others, which is what I'd be more interested in looking at.
Religions shape the world a great deal. They're all based on thousand-year-old scripture.
Just as the world shapes religions, there's a reason that monotheistic religions all emerged within a few hundred years of each other because they were products of similar social circumstances.
Uh-huh.
So that's kind of that's what I would focus on. I don't again like when you keep on focusing on like what like the particulars of like original Islam, then again I would like to know what you want to be done about that. Like I can there are tangible solutions to socioeconomic problems. I don't really know.
Well, we definitely need to just encourage reformism in Islam, but the problem is the most anti-reform fundamentalist Islamists are the ones with all the power in the Middle East at the moment.
Yeah, and I wish we would stop helping them keep that power. Yeah, I agree.
That's not our fault.
There was one leader in the last 20 yeah, it's had quite a lot to, it's just incidental that Islamic extremism took off in the way it did in the modern world. And not to mention these are updated, these are modernized versions of Islamic extremism. This is not the same form of extremism that existed 1500 years ago. Like suicide bombing and its relation to Islam was not conceived of in 700 AD. Like these are updated versions of Islam, and these forms of Islam did not become. It's just incidental that they became popular in countries as soon as they were caught in to global geopolitics. Just
I don't understand.
not so much of a coincidence to me.
Is incidental, but the increase in terrorism in Europe is just like has obvious, definite causes. Like, how can something like the rise of Islamists be like incidental?
No, I'm saying I was sarcastically saying it's coincidental to say that countries like Iran and Afghanistan became the way they were just as they were caught, like just after they were caught into global geopolitics, and were not like that before. I would say that's pretty like global geopolitics does quite a lot to a country. It does a lot to the everyday lives of the people who live there, and it will influence the way that they think and to what.
Talking about 2011 here, like the Arab Spring, that's really recent.
Yeah.
Like that's like that's not. There's minimal Western influence on that.
On the Arab Spring?
Yeah, the Arab Spring.
All these countries. They overthrew dictators who were supported by either not entirely Western, obviously like Russian involvement, especially with Syria, But
Yeah,
yeah, but they were overthrowing dictators who were funded by foreign powers and supported by foreign powers and put in place by foreign powers. Yeah.
yeah, to replace them with other dictatorships.
Yeah, so I'm not saying that what they did was good. I'm just saying that saying that's not our problem, even though like our taxpayers' money has contributed directly to supporting those dictators, like Hillary Clinton calling Mubarak and at one point Gaddafi like a symbol of peace and stability in the region, and then acting surprised when when people revolt against that. Like
Yeah, and
Gaddafi couldn't have done what he did without the help of America and Britain. Same with Mubarak. So
so everything is just at some
no,
point West's fault. Like I don't understand.
I'm not saying everything's the West fault. I'm saying because I live here, because I'm
I mean,
involved in politics here, then that's what I would talk about. Is like, what can we do here? For example, if I don't like the spread of Islamic extremism, which comes more from Saudi Arabia than anyone else, then that would be a good case for me to say we should support the one leader in the last 30 years who has said we should stop selling arms to Saudi Arabia, Jeremy Corbyn. That's why I'm going to talk about those things, because I think that matters.
okay, but do you know why is it incumbent upon us to do everything? Like why
I'm
is
not saying
another
what we're doing. It's incumbent on us, and it's incumbent on us to stop what we've been doing.
okay, that's
Like
fine.
I'd say, rather than funding Saudi Arabia's theocracy, but like there is such a thing as feminist and anti-state and anti-theocracy movements in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, they're not
If my taxpayers' money was going somewhere, I'd rather it went to them rather than the people who are literally murdering them. Yeah.
well, isn't our interference in all these different countries the part of why they're so fucked up at the moment?
Well,
Like
it
maybe we
depends on how we interfere. Yeah, if we fund theocracies and terrorists, then yeah, that's bad. But if we funded, I don't see us funding Saudi Arabian feminist movements is gonna cause the same kind of outcomes. No.
okay, but there's a difference between us having diplomatic relations and us interfering with these countries and their internal
Yeah, and
workings.
that's a very complex issue. But
But what
I'm talking about things that we're doing that are demonstrably causing harm to these
because
places.
I would argue that nowadays we're far more above board with these countries, are we not?
What do you mean?
Like we're not going behind their backs with covert CIA operations. We're engaging in open diplomatic relations with them.
Yeah, after long after the damage has been done. Yeah.
Okay, but are they going to forever just
And
look
no,
back?
I don't know, getting in diplomatic relations with. So again, what do you mean? Just look back. I don't know. I don't really know how long it takes for a country's institutions and the everyday lives of people. How long it's supposed to take to recover from decades of war and foreign intervention and despotism. I don't really know. I'm sorry. I don't really know how long it's supposed to take before I should just put it down to the personal responsibility of the people living in Saudi Arabia.
Well, it is already their responsibility to do that now that the West is no longer interfering, is it not?
They live in a dictatorship.
Yeah.
So yeah, the theocrats, the people, it's their personal responsibility, even though we're giving them
Everyone,
every incentive to keep doing what they're doing? Or do you
it's
mean the
everyone.
people? Do you mean the people,
It's
like the average, like the women who want to drive, or what?
certainly not the West's responsibility to fix the
I'm
dictatorships.
not saying it's our responsibility to fix it. Which I'd say if we try to do that, it often backfires. I mean, I think when they said that they wanted to de-radicalize Iraq, I would say
Yeah,
that they were sincere in their attempts to do that. It's just that they made it more radical than ever. I'm saying that we should stop doing things that demonstrably make these countries worse, and we are still doing things that make these countries worse.
I don't have a problem with that. But
Sorry,
the
we've got. Sorry.
sorry.
Yeah. I was saying we were coming up to 2 hours, and I think there's someone else who wants to speak. But again, that was. I didn't mind the digression though. That was.
Okay.
Anything
I
else?
don't want to. If do you have time at the moment, or what?
Or
How
what?
long do you want to keep going?
It's up to you.
How,
If you have any closing points for the last 10 minutes, otherwise we can just call it there.
okay. Well, I'll put a pin in that conversation. Um, overall, I think I see this as I just saw all this kind of stuff as a trend of the West blaming itself for everything when it's about time that we stopped thinking like we're the center of everything and we just let other countries do what they gotta do and take responsibility in equal measure. I'm sick of people blaming pinning blame on everything when they kind of just be practical about it. Like you're clearly an advocate of practical policy and taking action. So I think, the rest of the world has to do that as much as the West, and I don't think it's our responsibility to solve everything.
Yeah, I would think that most people I've spoken to on the left are not blaming. Like when you talk about blaming the West, I'm like, I'm the West. I'm a Western person. I'm not blaming myself. I'm not blaming you. I'm blaming our leaders, and I think it's a perfectly acceptable and actually Western thing to do that. Like anti-elitism and anti-establishment. These are Western traditions. I think we should follow them. We should hold our leaders accountable when they do things that damage the world and ultimately put our own ourselves in danger. Like 9/11, like would it have happened if we weren't training the Taliban for over a decade? Maybe it would have happened, but it would have definitely been harder for them to do that. So yeah, I think I'd like to direct the criticism closer to home. I don't really know how much is, and as for your thing about the other part of the world taking responsibility, the Muslim world is full of opposition. It's just that it's difficult. It's obviously harder for them because they can't vote out their leaders. So yeah, but I don't really know exactly I feel like I've got a lot more influence when it comes to the decisions of Western leaders. I don't really know how much I can do to the Saudi Arabian theocracy apart from advocate for our leaders to stop being so nice to them.
Okay, well, I don't have a problem with any of that in and of itself, so I'll just leave it at that.
Nice one. It's been nice chatting to you, friend.
Okay, thank you for having me on.
Cool. Bye-bye. That was significantly less confrontational than I thought it would be. I'm going to say, I would argue that I saw bad faith appear a lot in the direction of my interlocutor. I don't think that was bad faith. I think he meant what he was saying. So I think, I'm not like tired or bored in any capacity. I can't believe there were over 500 people watching. Hello, you guys. Holy shit. Hey, fucking promo, because communists are good at that. Subscribe, super chat, fucking Bitcoin, Patreon, subscribe, like all the things. Hello. I'm not debating you on federalization. Do I look like someone who knows what the fuck they're talking about? I've got some okay. Oh, I've got someone in screened. Okay. I have no idea what they want to talk about. Are we ready for another debate, chat? Are we winning? Are we enjoying ourselves? Not many people ducked out of that conversation, like 30, 40. Yes, yep, okay, amazing. We do. I think, wait, what we got here? He's waiting with baited. Thank you, mods. Okay. Wasabi, you're live. Don't say the N-word.
Yo, what's up?
Hey, how's it going?
How's it going? It's going great. I've been watching your stream and yeah, following along with the narration.
Cool. And I have no idea what you wanted to talk about, but I've just been told that you were here, so.
Yeah, okay, cool. So basically my the thing that I want to talk about, can you hear me well and clear?
You're very clear to me. Chat, is he clear to you? They're going to say yes, I'm sure. I can see the meters looking fine. Yeah, they're fine. Yeah. Go.
Okay, good. So my worry. So I'm a liberal. I'm not going to debate you on whether people are racist or anything.
I love liberals.
So
okay.
Yeah. No, not whatever. I don't care. I'm that kind of liberal.
Okay.
If you want to know. My problem with today's politics in Europe and basically radicalization on whichever side is interesting for you to talk about is if we have the leaders that we have right now and we still have a bunch of refugees coming from whichever countries, and people are mad about it for whichever reasons. And now those politicians, may they be relatively liberal and open people as they are, but they are not capable to deal with radicalization of Islamists and radicalization of right wingers. Things are just going to get worse and worse. And my problem is, what are we to do about that? Because I don't see a Macron or a Merkel or whoever will come after them is going to lead us to a better future.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, so you don't really trust the liberal leaders like Macron and Merkel and.
Oh no, I don't. No.
Yeah, yeah, me neither. They're very bad. I think.
Don't worry about it.
I think Macron's victory was just a delay to Le Pen. I mean, I hope not. But
same for me. I really hope that this isn't going to happen. But my problem is that it might. We just 3 days ago came so close to having a second term of Trump, and Jesus Christ, I I was on edge the last couple of days, as I haven't been.
Hey, we still might get 4 years
anytime.
of Trump. He could still win, according to him. So
According to
yeah. Let's hold on that one. So I mean, I'm not really. So yeah, I think I agree with what you're saying. I'm not sure. Was there a question that you had to ask, or what were you?
Yeah. The question is basically what to do with the situation when we have politicians that we have right now, and that we will still be having in the next, I'd say, 10 years. And people are going to get more radicalized on the far right, and we will have more radical people in the Islamists, basically, and people like Macron, or not Macron, who let's say Le Pen wins, and she gets a lot of applause for whatever she will be doing, and then people will follow her, and we will get more to the right. The Muslim extremists will be worse and more. And yeah, what's up? What are we doing?
There's a lot of extremism, and as a liberal, you want us to all get along. Yeah. Okay. No, I know. Yeah. Okay. I know what you're saying. I would say
don't do that.
I'm joking. I would say that what happens with I guess I could just go full on. I think when it comes to far right extremism and religious extremism, I think incidentally both of these are outcomes of the actions of liberal democracies, in the sense that what we've had over the last 30 years with the rise of the far right and everything was around the same time as, almost down to the same couple of years. And a good example would be the UK, would be okay, I'm gonna start again. There was I don't know if you know about Walter Benjamin. He was a historian from the Frankfurt School who wrote about the rise of fascism, and you could call it obviously fascism, extremism, in the 1930s. He put it down to 3 things that led to the rise of fascism. One was unemployment. The other was economic deflation, not inflation. That was earlier. And then the third one, which I thought was the most interesting, was the absence of a left-wing alternative. Because capitalism, liberal capitalism, alienates people. It pisses people off. It underpays them. It treats them as disposable.
Can I stop you there?
Yeah.
So I'd say, as a liberal, but also as how I see things happen around me, is that capitalism isn't doing that as much as it has been doing that 100 years ago.
Sure.
People are mostly okay. People have mostly food on their tables. They have roofs over their heads, and liberal democracy seems to be working so much or so little from whichever perspective you want to look at it, but it's working well enough so that people don't seem to care for a left-wing alternative. I just don't. I don't see it in my country. So I come from Germany, as you can probably hear from my voice.
Yeah.
I don't see it in the UK. I don't see it in France. I don't see it in the United States. I don't know.
I would
I'm
say
kind
it's
of lost.
okay. I would say it's grown as an alternative much more so recently. Okay, yeah, I agree. Now more than ever, people have quite relatively comfortable lives. I don't think it's just about having food on your table, though. I think it's a lot of it is to do with. There's a really good book on this called The Spirit Level, which basically studied almost every social problem you can imagine, whether it was like from breakup of relationships to crime to
Which is the book
mental
again?
health. It's called The Spirit Level by Wilkinson and Pickett. Spirit Level.
Spirit Level.
Yeah, and it basically realized it found out that every social problem, the thing that correlated the best with it wasn't how rich people were, how well fed people were. It was to do with economic inequality, which obviously liberal capitalism exacerbates necessarily almost.
Richard G. Wilkinson?
Yeah, and Kate Pickett, yeah.
Kate Pickett. Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah,
Thank you. I just looked it up.
Yeah, so it narrowed down pretty much every conceivable social problem down to wealth inequality. Like the greater the wealth inequality, the worse the social problems will get. I think that's maybe what we're seeing, because if you looked at, like, say, when it came to that and a combination of that and alienation, because say when populists like Tucker Carlson and Fox News and all the like right wingers, they often try to appeal for.
Can we all get a fuck Tucker Carlson
yeah,
in the
Tucker
chat, please?
Yeah, good move. No, but Tucker Carlson hates elites, so we actually are going to play his clips all the time. And I know, but what he does is he appeals very strongly to those deindustrialized parts of America, because although the average American is better off now than they were then, there are definitely communities that did get completely destroyed by deindustrialization. That didn't get replaced by anything instead. And people at that time were very politically active. They were much more revolutionary than they are now. They were socialists, they were communists, they were on strike like all the time. But when it came to their work, they were proud of the jobs that they did. Not like the service economy. They were proud because they were high skilled. They were doing things that not everyone else could do. They had security. They, in terms of relative pay, they could afford a house with their job and a relative sense of security. So I think really what's happening now is that thing about people not being into the left is not because they're too well off. It's actually because they're maybe sort of bullied into that. Like there's more of a sense of hopelessness and a sense of alienation that makes left-wing politics just like not really appear on people's radar. I would definitely contest your claim that it's not. I guess you probably would agree that it's more present now than it was 10 years ago. Like the word capitalism didn't even appear in political discourse at all when I was a teenager.
I mean, sure. I mean, I call myself a liberal. I'm more of a SOCDEM, I'd say.
Yeah.
To be completely honest, not that I have to.
Yeah, so I think that's the main thing, is that because obviously these far right groups, they do tend to, if you look at the people that they radicalize, it's people that will get radicalized regardless of how much propaganda there is on the right, I'd say, because there are people who are struggling with work, struggling with mental health issues, or struggling with any kind of sense of fulfillment or belonging. And these are all questions that liberalism, I don't think, can answer, but I think the left can. Which is why.
But again, this is why I actually am a SOCDEM and don't feel. I mean, this is why I watch people like you and people like you. This is why I watch your content and I'm very intrigued by it. But I can't really get blackpilled by the idea that we will have a socialist, that some kind of socialist reform is going to be close in the next couple of years, because I see that if we were to just if I would be a SOCDEM politician and would have some kind of power, I would just like get richer people to have more to pay a little bit more taxes, to have better social security, to like do all the things that you can think about, and people will be happy enough to not care for socialism, and they won't
I
because
don't.
they
No,
will
I
be,
don't really agree with that because
okay. Okay,
the
please,
history of social democracy has been a history of the rise of socialism. The most socially democratic like time, I guess you could say, for America, even Germany. Actually, I don't know too much about Germany particularly. France definitely was say 1950s, 1960s. Would you agree with that? Like the Marshall Plan and the welfare state and the building of national health services and the massive representation of trade unions, the fact that wage growth would often be geared to parallel economic growth. You agree with all that? That these were very socially democratic times?
I mean, sure, but they ended quickly and swiftly, and then we had the rest of the shit.
Yeah, we had the rest of the shit. But what I would say about those times, 50s and 60s, were also the closest that a lot of those countries came to socialism. Because what I think happens is I don't
sure,
think
yeah,
I don't
sorry.
think people need to become hopeless to become socialist. I think the more people get, the more fussy people become in a few senses. One, in that they just, I guess it's like a general human psychology. But the other is that what social democracy does for people is it provides a sense of breathing space for people in their lives and gives them the opportunity to start thinking about kind of like more idealist politics that's more into the future rather than the more seductive alternative, which is to look into the past, which is offered by fascism. So I think historically, but yeah, the most socially democratic time we had in Europe was 50s and 60s, and like there was almost a revolution in France, like 1968. That was run, but that was like spearheaded by very relatively comfortable workers and students who did that, not people who were hopeless.
Okay, sure, but if we just have like some kind of policy that is like the what's it called, the when you get 1,200 euros every month,
UBI.
yeah, exactly. If you have UBI, you still don't have like socialism,
No.
but this already gives people enough breathing space to do all the things that you said. So basically, going the next step is like for what? What's the point?
I'd say a couple of things.
People are basically happy. Yeah, basically, it would be complacent to the system, but that would be the same in any other system.
Well, I guess I mean
If people are happy enough and aren't getting radicalized from other spaces, things should be fine, right?
No, I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Okay. As far as everything you said there, absolutely preferable to what we have now. I never disagree with that.
Yeah.
What I would say is that the Achilles heel, this is more of an economics argument, but the Achilles heel of social democracy or Keynesian economics, to me, has always, I think, historically been inflation for a very simple reason, in that if you raise people's living standards, this is on if you get the Penguin edition of Marx's Capital Volume 2, on the back of it, it says that when people increase their living standards, capitalism, which is dependent on growth, profit, will find new ways to maintain that profit, and they'll do that by raising prices. So that's what happened in the 60s when unions had a lot of power and when welfare was very strong, was that prices kept going up, and then eventually you had an inflation crisis. So,
yes, sure, but if we then have a policy that doesn't make it so that Amazon can expand and people are becoming billionaires from the labor of the workers, then again you still have only social democracy, and that's fine.
you mean a policy to stop Amazon from raising prices, or because that's where inflation comes from? It comes from raising prices. That's like the crisis.
Like I'm not an economist, and I don't know how such rulings were to be. But basically, if you have some kind of rather them left-wing government, and they are saying that basically they are trying to they negotiate it so that prices don't get inflated, so that people don't get again less fortunate in their lifetimes.
Yeah.
again, social democracy wins.
Yeah. Okay. So again, like that did happen. Obviously, it wasn't the case that every pay rise the unions got, the prices the prices were just shot up immediately right after. What happened as well as that is also that what you're doing and within the framework of capital is that you are restricting the profits. Then you're shrinking profits, and capitalism doesn't like that. So it's a barrier, and capitalism, the way it works is it can't abide barriers. It'll do things to keep profits high, and it needs to keep profits high because if profits are not positive, then people stop investing. If you stop investing,
Yeah,
people
okay,
lose their
but-
jobs, and then people lose. So that's also what happened. So there was a few, like planned obsolescence became a thing. If they couldn't discipline the workforce by raising prices, they could do it by offshoring. They could just move to places. And then you'd have to put in a law that stops them from doing that. Then they could also do it by just making the products go obsolete quicker. And then you'd have to do a policy against that. So it's just like one thing after another. But what you're constantly doing there is you are moving power away from capitalists into the hands of the workers or to the hands of the people. And I'd say if you're going to go down that continuum, then why not just go all the way and realize that capitalists and the fact that they only invest if they'll make a profit, not necessarily to meet human need. The question would eventually come in as to why we need them. Now that's one argument. I'll give you the other, which is maybe a bit more simple, as to why capitalism, I don't think, even if every kind of condition you've described is met, can function in the way that you'd like it to, is the fact that capitalism needs to grow. It needs to grow at like as a whole, because our companies are interdependent and et cetera, et cetera. So a healthy capitalist economy is considered about a rate of 2 or 3% of growth. If it gets to 1, things get shaky. If it gets to 0, that's the definition of a crisis, because people don't invest in an economy that's got 0 growth. Negative growth, obviously, is what follows. So if you have a global economy that needs to grow, well, what does that mean? That means environmentally, it means that you need to extract resources at a higher rate each year than you did the year before, at a percentage rate. Percentages are exponential. So eventually you get a curve that starts to go like that, which is kind of why you've got this accelerating problem with climate change. Then also, what does it mean geopolitically? What does it mean when there's not enough investment opportunity in your own country? You have to expand and go to other countries. That was very conceivable 20 years ago when the Iron Curtain fell and you had like 22 billion workers suddenly available. What's that going to mean in 10, 15 years when there's just like a scramble for the rest of Africa and everything that's already happening there is, which you can describe as a scramble for growth and investment opportunities. Capitalism is, long story short, capitalism is demanding exponential rates of growth from a planet that does not provide an exponential abundancy of resources. And I think what we're seeing right now with a lot of the global geopolitical conflicts as well, and the colonialism and the environmental destruction, is all capitalism doing what it needs to do. So I think if we're going to function properly in the next 50 years, especially with climate change more than anything else, we need an economy that doesn't have to grow. And that's not a capitalist economy.
All right, sure. So is basically the end of your argument that that we can't, so that capitalism, if we put a lid on it and somehow try to ride the dragon of capitalism and make it so that it isn't as consuming and as problematic as it is, we will still have all the same problems.
Yeah, I mean, there's very good examples of that because, like, again, socially, people talk about like British Labour in the 1960s and or 40s and 50s about how they were very social democrat, very progressive, very good when it came to policy. They built the NHS and gave union. They were very bad with race.
So okay, quick questions.
Yeah.
So how did they not become communist?
Well, because capitalism finds a way, and because I don't know, revolution is something I guess that same with capitalism. Capitalism took 700 years to develop before it got to where it was. If you look at the history of Genoa and Venice, like that was capitalism. It rose and
No,
failed all the
sorry,
time.
there was
Same with socialism. Like I guess it's revolution takes
it.
time. And
Yeah, okay, sure, but then that's my argument basically for what I'm saying is that we have to try to get more to a more social democracy type of government, so that we can have all those barriers to capitalism, to capitalists who are trying to like basically milk the earth from all the resources and from all the labor. But right now, I just don't see a very I don't see a democratic consensus on whether or not we are going to be going that far left right now in Europe.
yeah, not now.
Anywhere.
I mean, I guess what 2016 showed you with Trump is that things can change very quickly. I mean, lots of history shows you that. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not arguing with that claim. Obviously, there are not many communists around. Like the left is we're not that powerful. Not really.
Yeah,
We have any power.
leftist
So-
Twitter is not the real world.
Yeah, leftist way is not the real world. So what I would say to that is, yeah, I mean, I welcome all that. I mean, I could go into the whole like the economics about how capitalism is crisis prone, and any gains that can be made from social democracy are just as likely to crash and have to the pendulum has to swing the other way. But I don't need to go too much into that, because if we were into that world you're describing, then that would be a much more opportune time to start bread pilling people on socialism.
Yeah.
So I welcome it. But really, I think as far as social democracy goes, I'm probably going to vote the same way you do for the next 10, 15 years. So yeah, wouldn't be too fussed
Yeah.
about that.
I mean that's okay. So that's the point that I wanted to make. So then in regards to in the way that politics Jesus is right now, even the social democracy that I would like to see, and as it looks like you would like to see in the next couple of years, we are not going to reach it. It looks like. So what shall we do as communist and SOCDEM adjacent and whatever people?
Well, I think leftists who don't support, the purists who don't support, what was I going to say? Leftists who don't support social democratic reform in the present day can go to hell. Like they absolutely should. If like the no voters, unless you're voting for a socialist. Yeah.
Have you heard the podcast with
Chapo?
No, not Chapo. There's like a chick and a dude, and they were talking to
Bad Faith.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
knew you were talking about them. Yeah, they are Chapo people, but yeah, Bad Faith.
Ah, okay.
Yeah,
I didn't.
fuck
know.
those guys,
I just I don't know if they are Chomsky, or if they are talking to Chomsky and they are like, "Fuck you, dude, you're not radical enough."
No,
I'm like,
hey,
what?
well, I'll tell you, I'll leave you with this thought before I let you go. You are more of a comrade to me as a liberal than either of them are. That's my conclusion for that summary. Do you have any other thoughts before I let you go?
Do I have any other thoughts? No, I'm not gonna start any other discussion right now. I'm
Okay.
fine.
Thanks for coming along.
Yeah.
All right. Have a good one, buddy.
It was nice chatting to you, and I really enjoy your work.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. All right. Have a good one, buddy. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That's how I think people should talk to libs. That's my take. Libraven, why did you... What happened to you? You didn't inflame anyone, did you? Were you kicked or are you banned or what happened? I guess there might be some trolling happening. My mods are very mischievous. I'm going to let one of the mods DM me as to why they banned you, and then I'll have to assess it. By the way, if anyone feels like they've been unjustly banned, you can just email me, because that will be because we're on high alert due to, recent events. We had a lot of Chud brigades jumping in here, and it was not fun. And I'd rather be extra careful. Okay. Interesting. Right. Yeah, Libraven, I don't have too long left. I'm actually I've changed the title of the video. I want to see if that actually works. Is the video title showing up to everyone else as debating viewers? We're not going to get any disappointed people expecting us to talk about Muslim groomers. No, debating viewers, love it. I actually just realized that I can't take super chats right now because my thing is fucked. Well. Right, Libraven. Add me on Discord, Libraven. I will chat, not for too long. I've heard there's a bit of suspicion, but we'll give it a go. Doesn't seem terrible. Don't worry about that, Libraven. Don't worry about that. Just take it up with me. We'll find out soon enough. Give me what the fuck is my Discord at? Right, Libraven. Someone give him my fucking Lonerbox hashtag something. I can't remember. Why don't I know? I don't have it memorized. Nor do I know how to find it out because I'm dumb as shit. Okay. Ending. Here he is. Right, I'll just call you Libraven. Although I have good cause for suspicion, so don't mind me if... Calling. Libraven. Hello.
Let me just mute you from the stream. I think that's done now. Can you talk?
Am I echoing?
No, fab.
Echoing?
We're on. We're good.
Okay. What are your thoughts?
Just wanted to talk about liberalism because I'm a fan of that. Really, I don't really know why I was suddenly banned. I was all screened and everything.
Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. We'll go into that.
I think the name Liberaven just strikes fear into people's hearts for some reason. I don't know why.
We all hate liberals here, you know.
True. So just wanted to chat about liberalism, just from an ideological standpoint, really, because I personally think that it's a better way of going about things, just working through like our values, what we're looking to do policy wise. So for me, liberalism is all about individual freedom, and part of that, in the sort of social liberal tradition, I guess, is the idea that liberals want people to be as free as possible through things that are granted to them by the states, as well as things that are limited on the state side, so they have as much negative and positive freedom as possible. And I think that we can do a lot with that framework without necessarily having to get rid of capitalism. Although I would also make the case that like end goal socialism could be a thing even within a liberal framework, even though it's quite a niche aspect of it. So would you say that that kind of way of going about things with that ideological goal is the right way of looking at things?
Generally speaking, because when I think of liberalism in that sense, that you just in the very kind of very broad ideological sense, I would argue that the most liberal people I ever hear about are socialists, because when it comes to like Karl Marx, for example, like what could be more liberal than devoting your entire life to the emancipation of humanity from unjust systems and unjust hierarchies and unjust systems that ultimately are very restrictive to freedom. So, for example, what I would say with if I was arguing with a liberal on, say, worker co-ops, for example, which I would consider an anti-capitalist structure, because there aren't, the worker-boss relation isn't really there in terms of economics, then I would say that worker co-ops are preferable because they are more liberal than corporations. Or private businesses. They're less despotic. They're more egalitarian. They're more free. People are more free, and they involve a lot more personal autonomy. They encourage personal autonomy. They adhere to liberal values better than capitalism does. That's why I would say my position as a socialist is that I feel often more liberal than the liberals.
Yeah, I guess that there's a bit of a distinction between the way that I think most liberals see this and most socialists see this, in the sense that the liberals tend to look at it on more of an individual side and the freedom that is granted to the individual, whereas the socialists try to think about it on a more systemic or grander or collective scale. And what I've found with a lot of people who have made this argument is that they say that co-ops are less despotic, and are less hierarchical and therefore in many ways more free. But at the same time, they don't seem to think that people should have the individual right to also start their own private business or work for a private business. A lot of people seem to think that there's a one-size-fits-all solution to this. And I don't think that's really in the interest of freedom whatsoever. I think that we can reorganize our economy so it makes it easier for co-ops to exist, should people want the freedom to start co-ops or join co-ops. However, I don't see any strong argument for prohibiting private businesses altogether.
Okay. When it comes to the difference between private businesses and worker co-ops, the most convincing policy choice I found was actually one that would probably be okay with you in that sense, because was the Labour's cooperative fund, which was because, first of all, cooperatives are given a very unfair hand because corporations can sway political power a lot more than co-ops can, just for the reason that they've existed longer, that they're bigger, they've allowed to grow bigger.
Of course, yeah.
But then so the cooperative fund policy was that basically private companies currently were, according to this suggestion, it came from Corbyn's Labour Party 2017 manifesto, I think. It was that any corporation in the country or any business is allowed to function basically as it already is, unless it reaches one of a few certain stages, whether it starts to require government subsidies to carry on business, or if it needs to go offshore, or if it wants to go public to issue stocks. There was one other, which I can never remember. But basically, if it needs to do things that either make it dependent on the public, or I think if it goes into administration, that's the other one. And then if it reaches any of those four boundaries, then they have to go through, they have to first go through an option which puts it to a vote amongst the workers to see whether or not they want to run the company themselves. And I thought that was like a very sensible thing to do, because once a private enterprise is in a position where it depends on the taxpayer, or it is inevitably going to hurt tens of thousands of workers or something like that, then that should be a call to, or if they've just failed, then I think that should be a good call to give the workers autonomy over what happens to that business instead. So
yeah, I think that's not a bad way to go, because here's the thing: like, there's that neoliberal lie that they say that they're all for laissez-faire economics and the free market, but generally there's a lot of government help for big business that goes along. They say free market, but they mean like they say that they're pro market, but actually they mean that they're pro business, and that's a different thing. I don't think we should be pro business in the sense that we should be looking after the interests of the businesses that are here. But I do think that we should be pro market in the sense that we should have as much freedom and possibility and competition for every citizen to have economic activity as possible. So I think this would actually help in that regard. I agree with you, and giving workers a vote, I think, is a really good way to go as well. But again, even with all this help, for co-ops, which I don't think we should go overboard with. I don't think we should give them too much of a leg up over private business just from government diktat, from an ideological standpoint. Like the government says, well, we want co-ops, therefore we're going to force the issue. But things like that, I think, are relatively reasonable. But again, I can't get over the hurdle of at the point at which people say, okay, well, we're not only going to just make it easier for co-ops to exist because we think people should have the freedom to choose that, but we think that we should limit the freedom of people to work for and start their own private businesses. I don't see anything inherently wrong with a private business. And so that's why I retain a sort of liberal capitalist or the reformed capitalist view of things rather than going down the socialist route. I think people generally have a rather different idea of what freedom means that seems rather strange to me. This one size fits all kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to I'm not really against the idea of if I wanted to hire 3 people to make something and I said, yeah, you work for me, but I'm going to decide what happens with the profits. I'll decide how much you get paid and all that, and then that's and I'll decide the direction and all that, and then they consent to that. I'm actually okay with that. It's just what I'm not okay with is living in a society where that consent isn't really present. Like basically, you have to work for the former. You've got to work for the despot, and because the option to work in a cooperative or even like a cooperative that is functionally a cooperative, a lot of them are kind of shit. So is very limited. So I mean, going back to your claim about, yeah, I'm not really against like people hiring other people. It's just, yeah, it should be a choice. It should be something that people want to do, not if they really want to work for someone who will give them no say over the profits, the share of the profits and things. Yeah, but it should be a choice. And that's why I think maybe I would disagree with what you said about the government being too forceful with funding co-ops, because I think given just the historical conditions, the amount of funding and state intervention that was required to make the economy the way it is now, to make corporations the way they are now, might need a bit of undoing. And if you agree that cooperatives are maybe more adherent to liberal values than corporations are, and it's the government's job to extend freedom to people, then they would maybe have to, I don't know a number, but what they'd have to do would be quite substantial. They would have to engineer a society that allows co-ops to become an option for most people.
Yeah, so I hear you, and that's a pretty good argument, I think. What I would say that I think would be a better way to go is reorganize the economy in general to allow co-ops the freedom to outcompete big business that's private. I think that's generally a better way to go, rather than the government, going from one people, from one corporation they're supporting through a sort of neoliberal ideological lens to one corporation they're supporting from a socialist ideological lens. I think it'd be better if they laid the framework for people to make the choices themselves. And so providing things like universal basic income, I think, would solve a lot of the problems that you bring up. It would give people the freedom to be able to choose where they work, rather than having to just simply work for to put food on the table. I think if that food is provided to them through a minimum income, however we may choose to do that, that would be a great way to go. I think that they would then have far more bargaining power as individuals and as collectives against private businesses, which would then have to adapt to fit. They would have to either change their their conditions, become co-ops, or offer more money. Otherwise, people are going to leave and start their own businesses, or join companies that have better working conditions, or join co-ops. And I think that would reorganize the economy to a great degree if we had a substantive minimal income. And I mean, I'm not a fan of the Lib Dems, but that's something that they've been talking about recently, which could be quite interesting to add to the national conversation. And obviously, Yang's been talking about that in America as well. And also, we can just have some general regulatory policies which deregulate some areas wherein you're propping up businesses, and regulate heavily a lot of areas where we can cut down the size of corporations, and allow for more competition, relax IP laws and things like that. So there's a lower barrier to entry when it comes to people that want to start up businesses, either if they're self-employed or they have a small business, or indeed co-ops. I think that'd be a really good way to reorganize the economy. So you allow the market to do its thing rather than the government dictating how they want the economy to look. It's more about providing that framework for the people themselves to choose. I think that's really in the liberal spirit, and I think that's the way that we should go.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we could do that, then co-ops have shown that on their own merits, they outperform corporations by almost every decent metric when it comes to
They often do,
every
yeah.
utilitarian metric. So yeah, I'm for that. I guess that's why I call myself a market socialist. Like I'm okay with markets. Like markets are good. Competition is good. And
Absolutely.
freedom to choose is good. So I think I guess just the problem. I don't know. It's all very hypothetical, I suppose. But when the reason that I go for the anti-capitalist thing in general is that there's always a power relation there. There's always a conflict, because universal basic income is a aggressive gesture towards corporations, because although people in Silicon Valley say they want it and everything like that, they want it on the assumption that people will spend the money, will direct the money towards them. What you would have to deal with, obviously, is people who suddenly all these businesses know that everyone's got an extra $1,000 or $1,500 in their bank accounts, is that they'll raise prices, and the things that get prices raised on them will be the most essential things like rent and food and all that. So then you'd have to go into policies there. So I think that's why I maybe prefer the whole the socialist angle, is because that like left-wing politics to me addresses that presence of political conflict that needs to take place to allow those things to happen.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the issues that I think I also run in with socialist ideology specifically. Usually Marxist in origin is the notion that the capitalist class have a certain interest, and that's in conflict always with the proletariat. I think when you talk about like certain Silicon Valley people who are pro UBI, I mean, when you look at it, most corporations I don't think are pro UBI. I think it's only a few, and don't forget that the people running corporations are people at the same time, and they have their own ideological bents. And of course, being a capitalist, and being wealthy, and having your individual circumstance be different to another individual circumstance will mean that you're going to have a different set of experiences, which will inform the way you think about things. But I think we have to be careful to categorize that so bluntly as like a class conflict issue, when there are many people within different classes that think in certain different ways and want certain different things. And regardless of that, even if the capitalist class did want UBI, I don't think that in and of itself is necessarily the best argument against it. I think we can look at how to implement it in a way that's going to mean that people have greater freedom, and it's not simply going to the top 1% again. I think with a whole package of things where we're having these regulations against the big corporations as well, that will all work together in something that will guide the economy towards something that's more free and open for everyone involved.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that I've read a few things that kind of like talk about that from Marxists and leftists as well, is that like there could be such a thing as that kind of like, I suppose the most possibly ethical capitalism, where corporations who have, because yeah, like I don't really know that many leftists who think the interests of the proletariat and the bourgeoisie are always opposed. Obviously, like there's lots of
Well, yeah,
examples in Marx of
I
how
tend to say like that people that don't follow that are class traitors. That's generally the line that I get when I point out that some people don't follow that. They say, "Oh, well, they're class traitors," which
well, don't listen to
which
don't
implies
listen
that
to
there's
these
one way to think.
Redditors.
Of it
Yeah,
as a
yeah.
class.
Don't listen to these Redditors. Fuck that. I don't know. But yeah, no,
It's not
because-
Redditors. It is Marxists that I talk to.
yeah, I mean, these people haven't read enough Marx because, like, Marx in Capital writes specifically about ways that throwing in the Discord is so funny. Yeah, Marx writes in detail in Capital about how workers' strikes in the late 1800s that led to higher wages were opposed by factory owners, but that when they were passed, factory owners made more money because they were able to sell stuff again. So there's like there's like perfect examples of working class interests actually rescuing capitalists from their own stupidity, for a better word, for lack of a better word. So yeah, no, I think people who make that argument just haven't read enough theory.
Yeah, I don't know what Marx specifically said about that, but as far as I understand it, like the general theory would be that even if they are, even if sometimes they are doing something that in the long run helps them economically, or going against that rather, the point would be that, oh well, clearly that was in their interests. They just didn't know what their interests were, and I think that's quite a dangerous notion because it assumes the interest of an entire group premeditatively, rather than looking after the fact at what their revealed preference is, which I think is a much more effectual way to go about things.
Yeah, I mean, I like when I think of things in terms of class, I think more in the sense of that gains made to workers or just ordinary people, just the average person, are when they are in conflict with the interests of capitalists, even if capitalist classes would benefit from it, but they just don't like it anyway, because that can't happen. Like every boss wants to pay lower wages instinctively.
But would they benefit from it then? Because if they don't want it, then it's not a benefit.
Well, no, as individuals, as individuals, like they're immediate, because again, profits are it's about immediate gains. So yeah, in the immediate sense, they would like to pay lower wages, which is why they do whenever they can. That's what offshoring is about and all that. But so as individuals, they want it, but because capitalists are not class conscious, they're always conflicting. They might instinctively want to pay lower wages, but then if they all get what they want, then no one can sell anything. So that's what I mean. It's just like, but when it comes to this kind of like the class dynamic, is that historically all these gains that have been made by workers, like whether it's workers' rights or the right to vote or the welfare state and all these things that enhance human freedom, have been gained through a result of conflict and have historically been opposed by bosses. So, and that's just the kind of, and with UBI, then there would be conflict in the sense that you'd have to deal with rentiers trying to increase their rents. You'd have to deal with people trying to increase food prices. You'd have to deal with ways of lots of different, the amount of cronyism that would go in from people trying to extract that new income, especially from lower educated workers. There'd be all these kind of conflicts, and I just think, like, personally, leftism articulates that conflict, our position in that conflict, a lot better than liberalism.
See, I disagree, because I think the way that you just framed that whole thing, when you're talking about like gains workers have made, it assumes that there is this external definite gain for workers that the workers only merely have to realize. And that the capitalist class, they just need to become class conscious of what their actual interest is, when actually the liberal standpoint seems to be far more accurate, where it says, well, each individual has their own self-interest and they can understand that better than anyone. In fact, no one can truly understand someone's interest because we can't actually experience what another person experiences. I think that's a far better way of going about it, because that actually gets down to the root of all of those individuals' actual interests as they are revealed in the way that they act, rather than having to ideologically assume what their position should be ahead of time, because that then skews all of your analysis.
I don't know if it does necessarily, because obviously, like, as individuals, these people can't, like, say if we're talking about a particular gain, like the New Deal, that was like that was a collective action. That was like thousands of strikes, and that was the CIO, the Socialist Party, the Communist Party. There was this whole conglomerate of collective interests. But at the end of the day,
Yeah.
that is a group of individuals pursuing their personal interests, and they got personal gains
Exactly,
out of it. Yet they got what they wanted as people. They got their weekends and their holidays and their secure pay and everything. So yeah, I think, but politically, I think the individual thing is maybe a bit less useful, because the only way that people can act like individuals were able to get that was by acting as a collective.
Yes, so this is the thing about individualism. It's not necessarily about working for yourself, but also it is kind of working for yourself, but that doesn't prohibit collective action, because collective action, as you rightly pointed out, is sometimes in the self-interest. So what I'm more pointing out on the sort of collective class analysis side of things is that rather than looking at all the individuals that banded together for their shared self-interest, you assume what a whole class of people's interests should be beforehand, and then say, well, those people that are collectively working for those ends are doing so on behalf of all workers, or whatever group you would like to choose there. When that's not necessarily the case, because some people who work might disagree with those strikes. They might want something different, and that is also valid. I don't think we should say that they are not a worker, or they are a traitor to the worker class because they think differently.
I think scab is maybe fine, depending on the context. I'm perfectly okay with shaming people who do that, especially because like
I can understand shaming. It's just assuming what it should be, because of who they are, rather than saying, "Oh, I disagree with you, and here's why, and I'm going to shame you because of it."
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, I think if collective representation isn't a sum total of at least the majority of individual desires, I guess I worded that kind of shit, but yeah, if a collective isn't a sum total of individual desires, then it's not a very good collective as far as I'm concerned. But yeah,
I agree. That's a very liberal way of looking at it, I'd say.
yeah, I'd say it's a left. Yeah, and I'd say we probably have a lot more in common than liberals and leftists think. I like.
Agreed.
I like most
Yeah.
liberals I speak to. There are there are some who are fucking terrible, but yeah,
Yeah, like there are sort of, I think the neolibs of liberalism are, or like the classical libs of liberalism are like the tankies of leftism, and I think there's far more overlap with the sort of more libertarian leftist minded people and the more social liberal people than there is with the other extremes of our respective areas of thought.
yeah. I mean, given the conversation we've just had now, and we both live in the UK, we're probably our voting behavior and our political action will probably be very almost identical
Similar, yeah.
for the next few
Yeah.
years. So
Yeah.
and I'm not gonna get upset because you're not posting Chairman Mao. I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that either, but whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't share the same memes, but we'll get over it. Why does before you go, why does Vosh hate you?
Oh, yeah,
The burning question in the Discord chat.
I just post various things in his chat saying that liberalism is great, and then I point out how much of a lib he is, and then he doesn't like that, because then leftists in his audience are always taking the mick out of him for that. But yeah, that's basically it.
Well, as a leftist, if you don't have liberal values, then you're not a leftist. You know, like you ain't black. Joke. All right.
Yeah.
Final thoughts, buddy.
Liberalism is awesome, and I think you should follow me on Twitter and YouTube. So thank you for the chat, Lonerbox. It's been great, and I've really enjoyed, looking at all the common things we have in terms of our politics. So that's really good.
Okay. Take care.
So yeah.
Fucking liberals. My only experience of LibRaven, I do like conversations with liberals when you just end up realizing we want all the same shit, albeit maybe slightly different approaches to political action and aesthetics. I mean, he's not a lib, he's a leftist. He just doesn't know it. Just hasn't read enough theory. My only experience with LibRaven before that conversation was that occasionally, because when I used to watch Vosh quite regularly, I would always just have it in my just have the audio. I wouldn't really watch. I would have something else going on. And he would just occasionally shout at Libraven every now and then. So I was expecting a bit more drama. What percentage of my diet is soy? I don't know if I actually, I used to have soy milk in my coffee, but I don't really like it that much anymore. It's bad for your teeth. So, and I don't take Brain Force, unfortunately. I've enjoyed this stream. We were at 680 viewers at one point. That was amazing. Discord chat is doing well. Yeah, I'll do more streams. I want to do every Sunday. I will never debate vegans. There's no point. The only debate a vegan would have with me where we'd contend is why I'm not a vegan. We would be debating should Lonerbox be a vegan. Not is veganism good, not is veganism better than a meat diet, not is the meat industry bad. Like, what? Not going to talk to Jordan Teresa. She messaged me on Twitter the other day. She said that she liked my channel. She said she liked my videos, and I said the same to her. It was nice. Starstruck. I don't know if she appears on streams, though. I would take her on. I would have a chat. It would be very, oh, I agree with you. Yeah. We're both good looking. Oh, shit. I don't think we have any more people. Oh, L. L want to speak? If L appears in screened users, we'll have a last one. Probably a quick one. I guess it'll be more agreement. Why are there no fucking Nazis in the chat? Not complaining too much, but it would have been. No, people who pretend to be Nazis are cringe. I'm not debating federalism and independence with you. No. I know it's important to you. I think I'm definitely, I'm obviously, I'm pro-independence more than. Okay. Opinions in Edinburgh. Shit. What's the joke? That a lot of people get stabbed in Glasgow, but in Edinburgh there are a lot of people who need stabbed. That's the joke. No, we're not defending Gordon Brown. Not today. Okay, chat. I've had a good one. Oh, maybe discuss the fall of Trump. That might be good. Very quickly. No. Yeah, so it's good that we've gotten rid of the very strange, very narcissistic, very troubled racist, and now we have a slightly less strange and troubled racist in office. Leftists, like, I think the memes are probably, I think after the inauguration, the memes are probably going to have to come to an end. We can't have more malarkey. We can't have Joe Biden with laser eyes in his head bouncing around. We're going to have to be like, fuck that guy. Biden bad. Biden does not represent the interests of workers, of people. We must end anarcho-Biden. Anarcho-Bidenism was just a lie. It was a lie to get the leftists to vote. We fooled them into it. We need to sway his hand with everything we've got. I don't have to because I'm fucking British. Biden's not going to listen to me. But should we be happy about it? Yes. I don't care how bad Biden is. We should be happy about it because only one party in America can get swayed by popular movements from the left, and it's the Democrats. We've got three more squad people, at least, depending on how you class them as squads. We've had an insane amount of mobilization, nearly 1 million more people registering in Georgia. We have triggered the right beyond repair. they'll be fucked for a long. As soon as they realize that they can probably do better than Trump, that they can actually get a demagogue who is slightly more disciplined and has more self-control and a bit more intelligence than Trump. As soon as they realize that, they'll be fine. But until then, make fun of them. Shit in their coffee. Spit in their nose. Because that's the only language they understand. They understand optics and use that against them. They don't care if you had better arguments. They would have come over to your side by now if they did. They care about looking like the strong, unemotional people. And the fact that we're comparing things, yeah, Tucker 2024, that would be, yeah. And the fact that there's any comparison here with the way that the Trumpers are behaving with the way that liberals behaved in 2016. When Corbyn lost his election, when Hillary lost, but especially when Corbyn lost, people on the left cried, sometimes publicly, sometimes on TV, sometimes on stream, which is I think is a pretty normal human reaction to bad things happening, to not getting your way politically, to knowing that people will get hurt by the outcome of a political event. The response of the right to deny that they've lost and to say, fucking, I'm not mad, Biden's a child smeller. You know, I would definitely say crying for a couple of days and being a bit sad and deflated is a slightly more graceful response to what we've been getting from the MAGA chamber. If anyone has any MAGA cringe based on the election, please send it to me. I have much use for it. Anyway, been almost 3 hours. My Discord chat has lost its fucking mind. I'm going to probably stream next week. I'll make a commitment for it. All right. That, you've been lovely. Hope you enjoyed yourselves. Stay safe. Bye. 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 Bye.